Listen, friend. In a quiet village where the rains speak first, my brother inherited all our father's fields, cattle, and keys. He called me servant, and the house I swept became a cage. I kept silent, carried water, and watched the moon remember every tear. Yet there was a stool, old as the first palm wine, kept for the ancestors. People said it hears truth like a drum hears a heartbeat. When the stool was brought out, everything changed forever. Stay with me, friend. Like, share, and subscribe so this story's wisdom reaches more hearts and warms more homes today. I come from a village where morning smells like wood smoke and wet leaves, and the sky opens like a blue calabash over red earth. We woke to birds that sounded like laughter, to goats fussing at the fence, to the soft sweep of a broom against the courtyard. The ground was always warm under bare feet. The trees bent toward the river as if she were an old queen, and we walked with our heads low when we passed beneath the big silk cotton tree near the path. Because our elders taught us to give respect to age and shelter. In that place, our lives moved with the seasons. When the dry wind came, dust rose like prayer. When the rains came, the ground drank so much that even our clay pots smelled new. My father taught me to read the sky as if it were a face. "Look," he would say, tapping his finger to a line of cloud. "The herd will need shade by noon." He could tell the difference between a storm that barked and one that would bite the crops. He could take a stick to the field and draw a map of wind. He did not hurry. His voice had weight, the way a stone sits inside your palm, warm and steady. In the cool evenings, he sat low on a carved stool in the corner of the veranda and told stories. It was not the ancestors' stool. That one was kept in the family shrine room, covered with white cloth, with beads and a small gourd that smelled of old leaves. But my father's stool still had a quiet power. He would say, in a tone that made us lean closer, "The land knows who walks it with love." My mother, whom everyone called Ma, kept the house as if each floor tile were a small garden. She did not shout, yet her silence could turn a room from careless to careful in a breath. She wore a cloth at her waist and tied her hair with a simple scarf. When she laughed, it was soft and round like ripe fruit. She listened to our father's proverbs and often added one of her own, as if stirring palm oil into stew at just the right moment. "Kind hands make cool water," she would say when tempers rose. When she greeted the morning, she touched the doorway and whispered, "Thank you," to all she believed kept us safe. I am the younger of two. My brother's name is Kojo. He is taller than I am, with a forehead that creases when he thinks, and eyes that used to shine when we ran to the river. As children, we climbed trees, our knees scraped and our cheeks dusty, and we dared the little crabs near the logs. He always went first and then turned to pull me up. He liked to stand on the hill above the fields and stretch his arms as if he held all the wind. We shared roasted plantains and secrets, and when the moon was smooth and the night warm, we lay on our backs counting stars in pairs, refusing to fall asleep until we reached a number only we knew. But time moves like the river, slow and strong. When we grew, the way of our people gave him a different place beneath the roof. He was the first son, and tradition placed a key in his hand. My father would call him to stand beside him in the field and speak to him in a voice like a low drum. "You are the trunk," he would say. "Your sister is a branch. A good trunk feeds the branch. A good branch throws shade for the trunk." He did not say more. In our home, things were taught in circles that returned to the path when you were ready. When our father fell ill, the rains were late. A wind from the east came too often. The sky had a pale place that did not change for days. He coughed in a deep way that shook the walls. Ma burned a bit of bitter leaf and prayed over water. The healer came with herbs in a basket and a cloth that smelled of river mud. We washed his feet and rubbed his chest with oil. He smiled at each of us, the corners of his eyes wrinkling like old bark. He spoke little, saving breath for waves of pain, but even then he made room for a kind word. To me he said, "Amma, keep the stories. When the time comes to speak, let the words be clean." To Kojo he said, "Hold the house so gently that no one feels the weight." The night my father died, the moon was thin like a cut on the sky. The house was full of shadows. After, there were drums low and gentle, and the elders took turns at the gate. Women moved like slow water, and men stood with their hands behind their backs. As a family, we sat the days and nights. We cried without sound. We wore cloth the color of dark earth. The hot hours bled into cool ones. The incense from the shrine room made the air sweet, and sometimes I could smell my father's soap in the breeze, as if he had walked from the bathroom to the veranda and would sit on the stool any moment. But he did not come. We poured water for him, we gave thanks. We sang. It was during the 7th day that I first saw the ancestor's stool uncovered. The elders brought it out of the shrine room and set it under the silk cotton tree. They dusted it with white chalk and placed leaves around it. They spoke to it as if to a person older than all of us. But no one touched it with disrespect, and none sat upon it. Even the birds on the higher branches grew quiet, as if they had learned too. An old man named Uncle Mensa, who had known my grandfather, said to those gathered, "When lives scatter, we come to the stool. It does not shout. It does not strike. Its silence is a mirror. Be ready to see your face." People nodded. My mother bowed her head. My brother stood behind the elders, his face straight as a spear. In the weeks that followed, neighbors brought bowls of food, and we learned to live with a room that kept our father's shape even after he was gone. Kojo took the keys to the storeroom and the papers for the field boundaries. Men came to talk to him on the veranda, and he sat as if the chair had grown a high back. He began to speak in phrases that sounded like they were borrowed. The estate must be managed. Tradition gives me the charge. He frowned when I asked simple questions about planting. He started to measure time with a watch he had bought from a trader at the roadside, though before that, he had always watched the sun like we all did, counting shadows as they moved across the yard. The watch ticked like an impatient insect that would not leave the ear. At first, I did not mind. He had new weight to carry. I kept the house, dug the beds for okra near the kitchen, and fed the chickens. I combed Ma's hair and rubbed her legs when she could not sleep. I woke before dawn to fetch water from the river, the rope rough against my hands, the calabash cool against my hip as I walked home, feet in step with the songs of the women who sang to keep their loads steady. The river never asked for thanks, yet I started to whisper gratitude into its surface anyway. It felt right to give back to something that made itself useful without noise. Slowly, a change came like a thin worm you could not at first see, only the small ruin of leaves days later. Kojo began to set rules that fit him, not us. He told me to sleep in the small storehouse outside the main room. "So you can wake earlier," he said, eyes on his new watch. "The kitchen needs you at first light." When I delayed a breath to look at the sky, he said, "Amma, do not drift," with a hand gesture that brushed me away. He began to close the door to the room where my father had kept his books and tools. If a man came to talk about a field, I was asked to bring water and then to leave. When maize was weighed after the harvest, my hands did the lifting, but mine was not the voice that counted the sacks or set the number aside for Ma's needs. I stayed silent because I thought of the trunk and the branch and because sorrow had made everything fragile. The first true cut came on a market day. The morning had a taste of dust. Goats nosed the rubbish at the edge of the path. Women tied bright cloth around their waists and set baskets on their heads. I had a small bag of okra to sell, hoping to buy new thread for a wrap that was thinning. Kojo met me at the gate with a cloth-wrapped bundle. He tossed it lightly in one palm. "I need coin," he said without greeting. His voice had grown flat like a drum held too tight. No echo left. "What is in the cloth?" I asked. "The beads," he said. He looked past me toward the road, as if the beads had already been sold and he was now waiting for a thing that came after that. "My mother's wedding beads?" I asked. My voice was thin from sleep and shock. I knew their weight and color, deep blue with tiny white eyes like stars. "I am head of the house," he answered. "We must improve. There is a radio. We can hear the news, learn prices early. We will not be blind when the world moves. I will buy it. Have you asked Ma?" I asked. My chest pressed hard against my ribs. The thought of Ma's beads in another hand made my stomach turn. He made a small sound with his tongue between his teeth. I do not need to ask a child about decisions? At that word, child, something old in me cracked. I was the one who had washed Ma's feet and smoothed her hair. I had kept the fire when it rained through the roof. I had turned the garden by hand until the soil loosened as if it loved me. But if I spoke, would it change anything? I lifted my bag. I planned to tell Ma gently, to find a way to hold the hurt without letting it spill. It was Auntie Abina who stopped him at the market stall under the mango tree. She wore a headscarf the color of burnt honey and bracelets that kissed each other when she moved. She had been friend to Ma since they were girls. When she saw Kojo unwrap the cloth, she knit her brows and shook her head. Kojo," she said, not loudly, with a kind of sadness. "These are not for sale. These beads carry a home in them. They are not palm nuts." Kojo smiled in the way that made me feel set aside. "Auntie," he said, the word polite but thin, "I hold the property now. I decide. You say beads carry a home? I say a radio brings the world, and the world carries more than beads." People nearby grew quiet. More heads turned than I expected. A boy with a basket of oranges stopped exactly where he was, as if his bare toes had grown roots. A woman who sold smoked fish put down her fan. I stood behind Kojo, a shadow that felt itself shrinking. Auntie Abina took a breath and set her mouth to steady. "Kojo," she said, "if you believe that, you will trade the roof for the rain." Kojo laughed, but it had no joy. He waved his hand as if pushing aside dust. "You cannot teach me in the market, Auntie." He placed the beads on the table and named a price. I stepped forward. My fingers wanted to take the beads, to tie them back into their cloth, to run home and press them to Ma's chest. But Kojo turned his head and spoke without moving his lips much, as if our words were a riddle that could be solved by anyone but us. "Amma," he said, "go. There is no need for you to stand there like a fly. You are a servant here. You should be home." The word settled like ash. Servant. He did not say it to wound. He said it as if he had found a name that fit his plan, and now he wrote it on me. My face went hot, then oddly cold. The market sounds returned. People haggling, a baby's wail, a goat's bleat. But they seemed far away, as if I were already in another place. Auntie Abina's mouth opened as if to speak, then she closed it and looked at me with eyes so soft I wanted to lay my head on her shoulder. I did not. I swallowed. I stepped back. When I turned, the sky looked too bright. I walked home carefully, as if the ground under me had become a thin skin stretched over a deep hole. Ma was in the yard, sitting on a low stool with a basket of groundnuts in her lap. She was shelling them, her fingers quick, her eyes far away. She looked up at me and smiled because that is how she greeted me, even when she was busy. I knelt beside her. I did not say anything. I took a handful of groundnuts and began to shell them. We worked in silence while the sun moved. After a long time, she spoke, a question small as a seed. "Does your heart sit, Amma?" "No," I said, and felt both relief and shame at the same time, because the truth was hard and the truth was good. "My heart walks." She nodded as if I had named a child correctly. "Mine walks too," she said. She tidied the shells into a small pile, as if order in one place might help us place order in another. "Your brother is young and the weight at his waist is heavy. He thinks speed will make it lighter." She set a groundnut in my palm. "The old stool is heavier than he knows, but the stool is friend to those who stand straight." Her words were slow rain. They entered the soil. My mind pulled toward the shrine room, toward the white cloth, toward the sacred stool covered, patient, quiet. I had only sat near it as a child when elders spoke blessings. I had never been asked to sit upon it. I had seen others swear truth before it, and once I had heard a man confess that he had lied about the boundary of his field. He had made noise in the village for weeks, loud words and proud steps. But in front of the stool his breath came shallow, and his eyes shifted like a trapped rat. When the elders asked him to lift a bowl of water from the stool and hold it steady, his hands shook so badly that the water spilled on his feet. The elders had not called it magic. They had said, "A mind that makes itself crooked cannot hold certain things." After, the man had apologized and made the boundary right. For months he spoke softer, as if learning to live with the sound of himself. I looked at Ma. "We could go to the elders," I said. I had not planned to say it. The words spilled the way water spills when you lean too far over a bowl. She placed her hand on my arm. "Yes," she said. She did not ask if I was afraid. I loved her for that. She simply nodded again, this time like a drum tapping a rhythm to walk by. "We will go when your heart is not angry. Truth needs clean water, not muddy rain." Days passed. The beads did not return. The radio arrived, metal shining like a new pot. Kojo placed it on the highest shelf as if it were a shrine of its own. He turned it on in the late afternoons and turned the knob until words crackled out in a language from far away. We heard voices talk of prices and speeches and storms on oceans we had never seen. He sat before the radio, leaning forward as if trying to catch a secret. When neighbors came to ask about seed, he spoke in a voice that did not pause for their breath. He began to check the storehouse at night, locking it twice. He began to use the word "I" where "we" once sat. In small and quiet ways, I pushed against the corners around me. I planted a line of beans behind the kitchen wall where the soil stayed moist. I used leftover stalks to protect them from chickens. I asked Auntie Abina for scraps of cloth and made a small bag which I sold at the market, then bought oil for Ma's back and feet. I taught myself to watch the shadows again, not to measure time like Kojo's watch, but to listen to the ground for when it was ready to give. One night, after a quarrel over whether Ma would attend a neighbor's naming ceremony, Kojo wanted her to stay home because the house must appear in mourning for longer. I left the compound and walked toward the shrine room. The moon was plump and kind. The air smelled of night flowers and dust. Crickets sang, and a little wind played with the edges of leaves as if they were skirts. I did not carry a lamp. I knew the path with my feet. The shrine room sat at the far edge of our yard, near a fence of woven sticks. It had a small window and a door my father had mended once with a thin piece of wood that looked like a smile. I stood at the door for a long time. I put my ear to the wood. I heard my own breath, nothing else. When I finally pushed the door open, the air that came out felt old and steady, like air from a clay pot that had kept water cool all day. The room held a small shelf with a gourd, a bundle of white cloth, a bowl of chalk, a cluster of dried leaves tied with a thin vine, and the shape my heart had been walking toward, the stool. It was carved from a single block of wood, dark with oil and handling, with a seat smooth as river stone, and a base the shape of a crescent moon. It had a deep hollow under the seat where elders sometimes placed a small stone for strength in difficult matters. In that moment, it looked to me like many things at once: a chair, a story, a door. I did not sit. I do not know if you can picture fear that is respectful, fear that bows its head and says, "I know you, and you know me." I did not want to break a rule I did not fully understand. I knelt. I placed my hands on the ground and touched my head to the cool floor, the clay pressing a faint red onto my forehead. "Grandmothers," I whispered. "Grandfathers, those who walked before, those whose names we speak when we are careful, help me hold my words until the right time." I did not ask for revenge. I did not ask for punishment. I asked for eyes clear enough to see a way that was true. The stool did not glow. The room did not shake. A moth fluttered near the window and then rested. A small animal scuffled outside in the dry leaves and moved on. I waited until my knees went numb. Then I stood and backed out of the room, closing the door softly. The next morning I went to the river at dawn. The fog on the water was a shawl. I bent to refill the calabash, and the water made circles like bracelets. I thought of my father's trunk and branch, how it takes both to make shade, how it takes both to stand. An old woman, Nana Essie, who was elder in our village and had eyes that saw through dust, passed with her staff. She walked like a child learning and an old hunter at the same time. She paused when she saw me and set her staff in the mud. The market left filled with water almost at once, as if the river wanted to climb into our conversation. "Child," she said. She did not call me by name, but I felt she meant the good side of that word. The side that says you still have places to grow into, and that is a gift. Grandmother, I answered. You have a stone in your dress, she said. I looked down at myself. I do not, I said with half a smile. She tapped her chest with her thumb. I mean here. It makes your breath sit shallow. You have been speaking to the old ones. I nodded. The river made a small licking sound against the bank. She grunted a sound that could mean many things. Then she looked up at the sky where the clouds had started to pull themselves apart for sunlight. Do not wait until the dry season cracks your lips, she said. The stool is not a pot to keep secrets warm. It is a mirror, as you heard. Carry it into light at the right hour, or it will show your face wrong. I knew better than to ask her if she had answers to questions I had not asked. I touched the rim of the calabash with one finger. I am afraid of shame, I said. My brother is head. If I bring a complaint, some will say I tear the cloth of our family, she nodded. Cloth tears when a nail is left to rust in it. The one who pulls the nail speaks louder for a moment, that is true. But the nail does not win. Do you understand me? Yes, I said. My heart beat like the quick of a drum. The elders will gather on the first market day, she said. I will be there. Bring the story clean with all the parts. Leave blame for the ghosts. As for your brother, if he has tied the cord of pride too tight around his head, the stool will loosen it or he will lose his own comfort. She made a small sign of blessing with her hand, a curve from her brow to her chest. Then she moved on, the tip of her staff making tiny holes in the wet ground, easy to fill. When I reached home, I found Ma sweeping the yard. She kept her face straight, but when I told her that I had seen Nana AC and that the elders would gather, I saw a line of relief in her shoulders. She nodded once and kept sweeping, sending the dust to the edges as if she were clearing a path for us to walk. I did not at first tell Kojo. I prayed to say the words in a way that would not turn a hill into a mountain. I waited until the afternoon when the sun had softened and the shadows grew long and cool. He sat with his radio, the sound low, his head inclined toward it as if asking for a favor. Brother, I said from the doorway. He turned, eyebrows lifted, as if I had interrupted a song he liked. Amma, he said. The elders will gather on the first market day, I told him. I have asked to bring a matter before the stool. I would like you there. His mouth tightened, and for a moment his old face showed itself. The boy who used to throw stones across the river and choose the flat ones that skipped. I saw a flash of worry, then it was gone. A matter, he said, as if he had never heard the word before. He rubbed the watch band on his wrist with his thumb. What matter? The beads, I said. And the storehouse, and the way decisions are made. My voice did not wobble. I was proud of that. The words were straight, like a broomstick. He laughed then, a short sound, as if I had told a joke. You will bring our house to the public yard? He asked. That is what you will do, Amma. You will put our cooking pot on the head of a stranger and ask him to carry it? I will bring our house to our elders, I said. To the stool that holds our grandmothers and grandfathers. If they say I am wrong, I will kneel and ask forgiveness. He stood up so suddenly that the radio shook. He placed a hand on the back of his chair, as if to hold the rest of the world steady while he steadied himself. For a moment his face moved like clouds that do not know whether they will join or part. He looked at me as if he wanted to find the child he named me at the market, the simple helper. Then he sighed through his nose. I am head of house, he said again, but the words had less iron in them. Still let them gather. I will come, and when I speak, you will hear that I have done nothing but what is my duty. Then, I said, let duty and truth sit together. He nodded. He lifted the radio, fiddled with the dial, and set it down again, finally turning it off. The house grew more silent than I had imagined it could. We stood there like two trees with roots tangled deep, each of us trying to decide which direction we would grow next. The days before the gathering were longer than they needed to be. My hands finished tasks and went back to the beginning, not because they were needed, but because I did not know where else to place my energy. I washed all the bowls, then washed them again. I brushed the courtyard and then combed the edges with a small stick until they looked like a straight line drawn by a proud child. I boiled water and added lemon leaves and asked Ma to put her feet in the bowl, and when she sighed and said, "Thank you," I felt a grief and a joy mixed so tightly that I did not know whether to smile or cry. At night, I lay in the small storehouse, listening to the breathing of mice in the wall and the whisper of the silk cotton leaves outside. The moon walked past the window and did not stop to speak. On the morning of the first market day, the air felt clean in my mouth. The world woke with purpose. Roosters made a sound like a trumpet that had never learned shame. My heart beat slow, as if it wished to be a drum that guided me. I wore a simple blue cloth and tied my hair back. Ma wore white and a smile that was almost a smile. We walked to the open space under the silk cotton tree where the elders met. Other people came too, because a gathering always draws spectators, and besides, those who love a family offer their eyes at such times, thinking their presence will help the truth stand taller. The elders placed the stool on a mat. They set a calabash of water beside it and a bowl of white chalk. They bowed their heads and greeted the old ones, calling the names of those who had been mothers and fathers before, each name like a door that opened briefly on a room we could feel but not enter. The wind moved in and then seemed to hold its breath. Even the goats that usually wandered to sniff at things that were not for them stayed away, as if guided by a bell we could not hear. Kojo stood at the edge of the space, hands behind his back, eyes forward. He had oiled his skin. The watch glinted at his wrist. He did not look at me. I stood beside Ma. She touched my elbow, not as if to guide me, but to say, "I am here." Uncle Mensa nodded at me. So did Auntie Abina. Nana Essie lifted her staff and made a small tisk sound, satisfied to see two young trees ready to face the wind. "Let peace sit here," she said. "Let truth be our only food." She spoke to the stool as one might speak to an elder relative. Then she turned to me. "Child, speak your story. Not the bigger version, not the smaller one. The one that can fit in a calabash without spilling." I stepped forward, and my breath did what breath does before an important thing. It forgot itself for a second, then came back. I greeted the elders. My voice did not ring, but it did not hide either. I asked permission to speak in the presence of the stool. They nodded. I told our story, the rain that came late, our father's illness, his gentle words, his death under a thin moon. I told them how the market watched my mother's beads sat on a table like a stranger, how I felt when someone called me servant, how the watch ticked while our old clock, the slow sun, still moved above. I told the truth that was mine to tell, and when I reached my limits, I stopped. I did not add spice to the stew. I did not starve it either. "Good," said Nana Isi. "You brought the story with its bones." She turned to Kojo. "Son," she said, "you had to carry the calabash before your hands grew large. It is a heavy bowl. Tell us what you think you carry." Kojo came forward. He had always been a good speaker when we were young. He could put words together like rows of yams, neat and useful. Now his voice was strong, practiced. He greeted the elders in the proper order. He lifted his chin a bit and told his side. He had inherited, he had responsibilities, he needed information, the radio was useful, beads were property. He spoke of custom. He did not breathe much between sentences. He did not say the word servant, though it bounced in the air like a fly around fruit. When he finished, he looked at the elders. He did not look at me. Uncle Mensa rubbed his chin. The others stood as if the ground were telling them something that needed careful hearing. A little wind moved the leaves above us. It sounded like someone sifting beans, listening for stones. "There is a thing," said Nana Essie finally. "Older than both of you, older than me." She placed her hand on the stool. "This seat listens when pride does not. We will ask it to help us see. But you must both be willing to sit the way people sit when they want to sleep without fear." She looked from one of us to the other. Kojo swallowed. I nodded. My knees felt like reeds. She called two children to bring a bowl of water and place it on the stool. She took white chalk and drew a thin line on the ground between where I stood and where Kojo stood. It looked like a river on a map. Each of you will put your hand under the bowl for the time it takes a hummingbird to drink, she said. Not long. While your hand rests there, we will ask simple questions. Your words must be light enough that the bowl does not move. She looked at Kojo. A good head does not shake a calm bowl. Kojo nodded. He came first because he was firstborn. He kneeled. He slid his hand under the cool wood of the stool, supporting the bowl from below. The elders began with very small questions, almost like greeting again. What is your name? Asked Uncle Mensa. Who named you? What is your mother's name? His answers came smooth and easy. The bowl did not tremble. Then the questions grew more pointed. When did you decide to sell the beads? Who saw you ask your mother? In whose hand did the beads last rest? To the first question, he answered with a day. To the second, silence gathered like moss. To the third, he made his mouth as if to say a stranger's name, then swallowed. The bowl did not shift for the first two questions. At the third, it made a small slide across the polish, a movement so slight it could have been imagination. But it was not imagination. I saw water quiver. Kojo's eyes flicked toward the bowl, then back to the elders. They asked about the keys to the storeroom. Who had keys before? What did your father say about doors? Kojo said, My father told me to keep safe what is ours. That was true. He said I took the keys. That was true. Then he said, He told me to shut the door to all others. And the bowl spoke again, a small sideways step in the hands of a young man whose arms were steady enough to carry grain. The stool did not shout. The water did not spill. But all of us could feel the tiny difference, the way a mind registers a pebble even when the step is sure. When it was my turn, I came and placed my hand under the bowl. The wood was warm, smooth. The water made a round weight. The chalk line on the ground looked like the edge of shore and river. The questions were the same. My name, who named me, my mother's name. My answers were easy. Then the deeper ones. Have you spoken harshly to your brother? Yes. The day of the beads after, when I had cried in the room and gone to him with my eyes still hot, I had said, You are breaking us. Have you wished your brother shame? I breathed carefully. Yes, I had wished it in the way a word arrives before you know it has left your mouth. Have you stolen from the storehouse? No. Have you worked for what you eat? Yes. As I spoke, the bowl stayed still. My arm ached, but it did not shake. I thought of my father's trunk and branch, and my breath fell in time with the small sound of leaves above us. The elders thanked us. They took the bowl and placed it on the mat beside the stool. The water was unspilled. The morning had aged into noon. The shadows of our bodies reached away from us like questions turning into answers. People at the edge of the circle had grown quiet enough to hear a bird call twice from the branches beyond. Now, said Uncle Mensa, we will hear the house speak. He turned to Ma. She stepped forward with humility so strong it looked like a ribbon that could hold a man upright if needed. Mother, he said, you carry more days than we do. Speak to the stool and tell it what your eyes have counted. Ma stood with her hands folded, her palms pressed together in a soft clap as if in prayer. I love my son, she said. I love my daughter. When the rains came late and sorrow came early, we lost the hand that kept us balanced. My son took up the work. He has forgotten to share it. My daughter has swallowed many words to keep the air peaceful. In our house, he has called her servant, and he has not asked me before he moved the beads that were my honor. I fear the word duty has been used as a cloth to cover a small pride. I ask for a path that allows us all to walk straight. Her voice flowed like the river. Even Kojo, whose body tried to keep itself stiff, bent his head. The elders asked 2 neighbors to speak. One said he had seen me at the well before dawn every day. He said I had given his wife oil when her feet swelled. The other said he had heard Kojo tell a mason to build a wall around the storehouse that was taller than a man. Then later, he had sent the mason away without pay when the wall leaned in the first rain. He had paid the mason himself to avoid a quarrel. Kojo closed his eyes at that. He opened his mouth, but the elders raised a hand, asking him to wait. This was the stool's hour, not the time for word fighting. The sun had shifted to the west. The color of the day began to warm. A leaf drifted down like a small silent boat, and landed near the chalk line. I heard a child cough near the edge of the crowd and then hush again, leaning against his mother's leg. The stool sat, old wood, quiet and alive in a way that made my chest feel open. I thought of all the people who had placed their troubles near that wood. How many storms had passed overhead while it held its shape. Finally, Nana Essie tapped her staff, and the sound brought a little circle to its end. She turned her body slightly so that she faced the stool, then faced us both. "The stool has not jumped," she said. "The water has not turned over. But truth does not always need a drum to be loud." She looked at Kojo. "Son," she said, and the word was a blessing and a call. "You have allowed a new position to make you new in the wrong way. You have made a sister into a servant with your mouth. You have used your mother's beads to buy words from a distance, forgetting the sound of the voice that taught you to speak. You have shut a door and then claimed the door as duty. I say this to your face as I would say it to my own son's face." She turned to me. "Child," she said, "you have made your hurt a small shadow so that your house would not break. That is good for a moment and bad for a year. You must speak earlier. You must not wait until the fruit spoils to call the market. Your tongue must learn to carry truth even when you fear the faces that will watch." She motioned to the stool with her chin. "This stool holds all of us. It settles things because we promise to be settled by it. Do you both promise?" "I promise," I said. It felt like placing a lantern on a table and seeing its light reach all the corners. Kojo's jaw moved. He swallowed twice. He looked at the chalk line, then at his hands. He nodded. "I promise," he said, and the watch on his wrist made a small, helpless gleam, as if it were only a piece of metal. Which, of course, it was. "Then listen," said Nana Essie. "The head of house is a door, not a wall. A door opens and closes with care. From now, the storehouse keys will hang in a public place inside your compound where Mother can see them. Any decision that touches honor or the heart, a bead, a photograph, a name, must be spoken first to the mother who holds those things. You, son, will give your sister a fair field of her own near the west boundary, where the soil is soft and water keeps near, and you will give her seed from the storehouse for 3 seasons as she begins. She will tend her portions. She will share her first harvest with the stool as prize to truth." Kojo opened his mouth slightly as if to object. She lifted a hand and he closed it again. "You will ask forgiveness for the word you placed on your sister like dust on a new cloth. You will speak that word now to the stool and ask it to carry it down into the ground. I will watch you, all will, and you, child. You will forgive with your feet as well as your tongue. You will walk in the same yard without making cold space. Forgiveness is not sleep, it is work. Do you understand?" I nodded. Hard and easy rose together like the twin heads of a river. "Finally," she said, and her voice grew gentle, "take the radio and place it in a good corner. Let it speak when human voices do not need to. Let the world in like a neighbor, not like a master. You will both sit with your mother by that radio and hear a program once a week and talk about it afterward. Let it be a tool for a roof, not rain inside the house." There was more, small pieces that would shape the days to come. We would mark the border of my field with white stones that belonged to our family since my grandmother's time. We would ask the mason to return and fix the wall properly, and Kojo would pay him twice because he had caused him shame. We would hold a meal the following week where we would invite 3 households to sit with us and witness our new way of being, as a sign to the stool that we did not hide our promises. The elders ended with a prayer that was not exactly words, more like the shape of a song. When they finished, they tapped the stool, covered it with its white cloth again, and carried it back to the shrine room. As they passed, the wind seemed to nod. People began to disperse, quiet and slow, as if they were walking down a hill after looking from the top for longer than they expected to. Kojo stood still. Then he turned and faced me. He did not speak right away. He made his palms touch and lifted his hands to his forehead, then brought them down, a small bow. "Sister," he said, and the word had back in it what it had lost. "I said a name you did not deserve. Forgive me." "I forgive you," I said. I felt something inside me set itself down. Not a heavy thing, but a careful one that had looked for a place to rest and finally found it. I will work the field, I added, and share my first harvest with the Stool. He looked toward Ma. He went to her and knelt. He placed his head briefly on her lap. He did not weep, but his breath came in a way that said he could. Mother, he said, forgive me. I did not respect your honor. I was chasing the world with a stick while my home stood waiting to hand me a better tool. She lifted his head and kissed his brow. Stand, she said. She did not make a speech. She did not need to. Her blessing was in her 2 hands. We walked back to the compound together, not touching, but not far either. The afternoon rested on our shoulders like a light cloth. The goats made their usual noises. A child ran past and fell, then laughed as if the ground had meant a joke. At the doorway to the main room, Kojo paused and pulled the keys from his pocket. He looked at them as if seeing them for the first time. Then he hung them on a nail by the door where anyone could see them without touching them, and he glanced at me to be sure I saw what he did. I nodded. The keys did not look smaller, but they looked light enough for a good door to hold. That evening, the sky turned a color that our language names and yours might not, a color like the inside of a sweet fruit when it is almost too ripe. The radio hummed quietly, then quieted itself, as if also listening for something beyond its own sound. Ma sat on her stool with her feet up, a sign of peace. I washed the bowls and let them dry on their own. Kojo came to the doorway and asked if we could walk for a short time. I looked at Ma. She gave a small nod, forever my compass. We headed toward the place by the river where the reeds grow taller than a man. We did not speak at first. The world made a soft sound like breathing. Finally, he said, I was afraid. He took a breath and let it go. I was afraid that if I did not grip everything, I would lose our father again. I am sorry I turned my fear into rules. I looked at the water. It moved past us as if carrying all the fears you could throw into it. I was afraid of shame, I said. But shame grows like mold in dark corners. Elder Nana said to carry the matter into light. I am glad we did. I touched his arm. It felt like the trunk of a young tree that had been pulled by wind all day and now had a chance to rest. He nodded, his mouth twisting as if he was tasting a new spice. We will mark your field tomorrow, he said, before the sun becomes rude. Good, I said. The word hung there, simple and round. The frogs began to pluck sounds from their small bodies like strings from a tiny instrument. The first stars appeared, slow. When we returned, the house felt like a house again, not a place to pass through quickly on the way to Pride. I slept in my room inside the main house. No one mentioned the storehouse. In the window, the moon leaned on the sill like a grandmother checking on children sleeping, though I knew she was only light and not a person. Still, she felt tender and old. In the morning, we rose with the birds. We ate porridge. We spoke of weather and the way the yams looked strong this year. Kojo took a basket of white stones and a shovel. I carried a small hoe. Ma followed with a cloth on her shoulders, as if the field were a guest we wished to greet well. We walked to the west boundary where the soil is softer, and the ground slopes a little toward the stream beneath the fig trees. The grass there smells peppery when you crush it with your feet. The woodpecker in the tall tree tapped his day awake. The air was so clear it made small things look close, a butterfly's wing, the lip of a broken pot half buried at the path. We placed the first stone together, a habit that would become a ritual, a white circle beneath our hands, cool with the memory of river. Then we measured with our steps, the careful way our elders taught us, heel to toe, speaking numbers not because math ruled us, but because numbers held human promise when used for fairness. After every 20 steps, we set another stone. We joked about who took the bigger steps and then fell into a comfortable quiet that made words feel like salt. Valuable, but not to be poured out without thought. When we finished, the field lay like a clean page waiting for a story. Farmers reading this would know how this part feels, a future drawing breath through soil. We walked its length and returned, the way you run your fingers over new cloth to feel its weave. Kojo looked at me. His eyes were no longer the sharp, darting kind of a man guarding something. They were the eyes of a brother trying to remember the path to his sister's door. Your first harvest, he said. I will walk with you to the stool. I will be grateful for that, I said. The sun lifted itself a little higher. The world looked the same. But my heart had found a chair, and in that moment, I could have sworn I heard the ancestors, who do not speak in words, say, "Good, sit, work, live." We turned toward home, and as we did, I realized something that made me smile. The path we were on would take us by the shrine room. I looked at it, to the door my father had mended, to the small window where the moth had fluttered that night. I did not go inside, not then. I only touched the wall as I passed, and its coolness went into my palm like a blessing. The stool had settled our matter, not by force, not with punishment, but with a wise weight that made the scale balance again. The days ahead would test us. People always test their promises like ropes. They pull to see if the knot holds. But I had seen my brother's knees bend. I had felt my own mouth shape forgiveness in a way that made it true. We were not done. We were just beginning to be right. And in the room behind the wall, covered again by the white cloth, the old stool waited for the next time a heart needed help to stand. The next morning, the wind smelled like clean clay and young leaves. Dawn pulled a pale ribbon across the sky, and the first calls of the pied crows moved from tree to tree. I tied my cloth, lifted my hoe, and walked the short path to my new field. The white boundary stones caught the early light and looked like small moons asleep in the grass. The soil, after our last rain, felt soft under my soles. When I pushed the hoe into it, the sound was a hush, like the sound of a hand smoothing a wrinkle from a blanket. I knelt and touched the ground with my fingertips. It was warm. It held the night's water. I thought of my father's voice. The land knows who walks it with love. I greeted the field as I would greet a guest. "Good morning," I whispered. "Do your work in peace. I will do mine." A thin brown lizard appeared on a stone, lifted its head to look, then ran away with a quick shake of its tail. Kojo came up the path carrying the basket of seed. He had left the watch behind that day. His wrist looked strange without its metal circle, as if a vine had been cut. He was breathing a little hard from the climb. He set the basket down carefully in the shade of a tree. "The seed is dry and clean," he said, and his voice had softened. "I checked it last night. No weevils, thank you," I said. My eyes went to the basket. The mixture of beans and maize glowed in the morning like a small harvest before there was a harvest. He squatted, picked up a handful, and let it run through his fingers. It made a sound like rain on a small roof. "I wrapped the mason's string around that stump," he added, pointing. "If you want straight rows, we can run the line. Or if you prefer to plant by feeling, I will not argue." He smiled, not in the old way, not with pride, but with a kind of offering. "Let us use the line for the first 2 rows," I said. "We will let our feet teach us the rest." He nodded and rose. Together we stretched the string, one end tied to the stump, the other to a small peg. The line quivered slightly in the moving air and then settled. We pressed the tips of our sandals into the dirt to mark spacing. His steps were longer than mine, as always, but he checked himself, took shorter ones, looked back to see if they matched. Then he made a small laugh. "You see," he said, "trust is like this line. If I pull too hard, it lifts off the ground. If I do not pull at all, it sags. There is a place in between." "I remember," I said. "You used to hang your shirts on a rope so tight the cloth stretched." He shook his head at himself and then set to work with the hoe. We moved down the line together, small holes, a pinch of ash, a seed, cover, and a pat. The little rhythm was easy to learn, the way a good song teaches itself to you. The sun rose a little higher and warmed the back of my neck. Birds fussed in the fig trees to the west. Far down the road, a child laughed for no reason that we could hear. Ma came later with a small pot of water and a calabash full of roasted groundnuts. She stood at the edge of the field with one hand on her hip and watched us work for a few breaths, her face quiet. Then she clucked low in her throat as if pleased with a child who had learned a new word. "Drink," she said, "and eat a little salt with the groundnuts. The sun will take more from you than you think." We rested on the low earth bank. My fingers smelled like clean dirt and ash. Kojo chewed slowly and looked out across the field, a long look that reminded me of the boy who used to stand with his arms wide on the hill. "It is good," he said. "A field is a promise." Then he turned to Ma. "I will go to the mason after we finish. I will pay him and ask him to repair the wall. I will apologize." Ma nodded, the kindness in her gaze deeper than any water. "A good apology builds a longer bridge than 2 stubborn words," she said. The days that followed tasted like work done in the right season. We rose early, we weeded. We carried water in calabashes and let it pour at the roots of small plants with the sound of a whisper shared. I learned the feel of my field's hunger and its rest. I pressed mulch of dry grass around tender stems. I listened for insects, the good ones and the ones that might chew too much. When I found the tiny green worms, I plucked them gently and set them in a little bowl for the chickens later. I kept my eyes on the color of leaf and the tilt of flower. I touched the soil and spoke to it as if it could answer. In its way, it did. Kojo began to come to the field in the hours when the sun grew less proud. He brought stories from the other side of the compound. A neighbor's cow had learned to lift the latch with her tongue. A cousin had fallen in love and spent too much time looking at the moon and not enough time looking at the yam mounds. He kept his watch in his pocket or forgot it entirely. He asked questions without making them into commands. Sometimes, after our work, we sat in the shade and listened to the river make its own plans below us and remembered how we had played there as children. On every 7th evening, we kept the promise that the elders placed between us and the radio. We wiped the long bench. Ma brought her stool. I set a small plate of fried plantain on the table. Not too much oil, a pinch of salt. Kojo lifted the radio and set it in the corner where the wall kept the sound even. The radio's voice came from far, yet it sounded like a neighbor when it was not too loud. We listened to a program about soil. A woman with a steady voice spoke about keeping water where it falls. She said on a slope we should make small lines that follow the hill's shape, not fight it. She explained the word contour as if she handed it to us in a bowl. Like the cow paths, Kojo said when the program ended. They curved to hold the hill. He traced a small wave in the air. "Yes," I said. "We can try this above the west edge. It may keep the roots happier." We agreed to test it on a small section. After the program, we turned the radio off and spoke to each other, not to the machine, just as the elders had asked. We kept that habit. The radio did not carry the world into our house as a master. It came and sat like a polite visitor. When it left, we sat with our own voices and felt them grow strong again. Not everything was clean and simple. One morning, a man named Yaw, whose field lay beyond the fig trees, came to our boundary. He was older than Kojo by a few years, with a friendly mustache and a way of smiling that often hid a sting. He looked at the white stones. He clicked his tongue softly and shook his head with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Sister Amma," he said, "good morning. I see your field has grown to cover more than your father left." He pointed to a line near the far stone. It sat close to a worn footpath people had used for years when they cut across the bottom of Yaw's field. He tried to make it sound like a joke, but a little heat rose in his eyes. "This path must not become a private road, eh? The stones are where the elders placed them," I said. My voice was calm. I had walked the steps with Kojo. I had placed my heel and toes in the same careful way. I knew the shape of my field like I knew the shape of my hand. Yaw shrugged and looked over his shoulder, as if sharing his concern with the air that happened to be listening. "Oh, I am not quarreling, no. I am only saying some people are quick to forget where their feet were before. But it is fine. I will step wider." I did not answer. I watched him go. "Later," I told Kojo. He put his hand to his chin and made a small, thoughtful sound. "We will invite Uncle Mensa to walk the line with us again," he said. "Not because I doubt you, because a second eye keeps 2 hearts from growing thorns." We did as he suggested. Uncle Mensa came, held his hat in one hand, walked, counted, nodded. He pushed one stone with his toe. It did not move. "This is your line," he said. "Yaw likes to test sound wood with his knuckles." We gave Yaw a calabash of water and a greeting the next time we saw him. He took the water, drank, and did not speak of the path again. Plant by plant, day by day, the field began to look like a home. I felt it in my body when I slept at night. My muscles hummed in a low, steady way. Some mornings, when cloud gathered like rolled cloth on the horizon, I woke before the first bird and went to stand near the boundary stones. Not because the field asked for company, but because it felt good to say, I am here. I knew the small depths where water pooled after rain. I knew the places where wind pressed harder as it came down the hill. I learned how much I could carry in one trip without spilling. My hands grew a new strength. Ma touched my palms one evening, ran her thumb across my skin, and smiled. Your father would say thank you for the way you hold his land, she said. The mason returned too, called by Kojo's message. He came with a new level, a small tool with a bubble that told him where straight lived and where it did not. He pulled the leaning wall down where needed, gathered the stones with care, and set them again with hands that knew patience. Kojo stood beside him in the afternoon, passing water, not giving orders. When they finished, the wall looked like a line drawn by a careful child, firm and fair. Kojo pressed the mason's hand with payment and a small extra bundle of cassava. For trouble I caused, he said. The mason nodded, pleased but not proud. For a time, peace held like a cloth that had been mended well. The wet season started in earnest. The sky rolled deep and gray on some afternoons, and the smell of rain came early, like the arrival of a beloved relative before you had swept the floor twice. We planted more, we weeded, we smiled at the stems that pushed themselves clean and strong out of the ground. In the evenings the frogs sang and the moon grew fat, then thin, then fat again. The radio taught us a trick for keeping weevils out of stored maize with dry neem leaves. We tried it, it worked. We ate bowls of stew with peppers that made our mouths remember heat and our hearts remember rain. If you had passed our compound in those days, you might have thought no trouble could find us there. But trouble, like fog, knows how to slide in where you trust the ground too much. A man arrived on a Wednesday that smelled like washed earth. He came on a motorbike that sounded like a fly too big for any window, and he wore a shirt with buttons that were too shiny for farm dust. He had smooth shoes. He had a smiling mouth that did not change his eyes. His name was Sifa. He told us so himself, with a nod as if he had brought a small gift with his name. He said he came from the town down the paved road where the market had roofs made of tin, and where, if you believed him, everything grew more quickly than it did under our silk cotton tree. Kojo was the one who met him at the gate. I was at the back of the yard pitting palm nuts with Ma when we heard the motorbike cough into silence. The smell of petrol floated over the smell of palm oil. Kojo's voice carried in a polite arc through the air. Welcome, stranger, he said. What brings you? I wiped my hands and stepped into the shade near the doorway. Sefa had a simple, eager restlessness about him. He glanced at the house, at the wall, at the yard, learning everything without looking like he was learning. He produced a card from his pocket and held it in 2 fingers like a small flag. I buy and I support, he said with a grin that showed teeth. I am a friend to farmers. I come before the harvest so that minds can rest. Money now, food later. Your hands are busy, why should your head worry? He opened a bag and showed papers with neat lines and stamps. The ink was too dark, as if it were trying to hide something inside it. He explained a plan that sounded simple. He would give an advance of money to families who signed so they could buy fertilizer or tin or school books without waiting. At harvest, he would come with his truck and take a set number of sacks at a price agreed in advance. No surprise, he said. No race to the market. No arguing with a trader's mood. The words came smooth. They felt like water poured too fast into a pot, splashing up the sides before you had a chance to see how much there was. Kojo leaned forward to read. Sifa placed a finger on a line and spoke of fair weights, timely arrivals, friendship. He did not say the word interest, though the word sat curled like a sleeping snake in the long sentences. I stepped closer. Does the agreement have a witness? I asked. Will someone from our village sit and hear the terms as they are spoken in our language before any thumb meets your ink? My voice was calm. It was not suspicious, only careful. The stool had taught me that caution is not a lack of trust. It is a way to help trust walk on two legs instead of one. Sepha turned toward me slowly. He smiled again, but it did not grow to his eyes. Sister, he said smoothly, of course. We can read it together. There are simple words. I use the same paper in many villages. It helps me keep order. If we do not use paper, people forget. You know how people forget? Ma came to stand beside us. She greeted him and brought a stool. He sat without asking, and crossed one leg over the other at the ankle like a man who has visited enough compounds to believe all chairs belong to him after a moment. He looked at Ma's face, not deeply, but enough to learn whether she would resist or watch. He saw, I think, a quiet woman who would not raise her voice in a yard if a pot broke. He allowed himself a little breath of ease. Kojo did not sit. He paced a few steps, then came to lean over the papers again. The radio spoke of prices falling when there is too much maize on the market, he murmured, partly to himself. If we agree now, the price is safe. We could fix the roof before the long rains. We could buy new tools. We could add a goat? His eyes moved fast. He ran his thumb along the edge of the paper, as if smoothing it would make the future smooth too. Speak to the elders, Ma said. Let us ask for eyes we borrowed before. Her voice was soft, but I felt its root go down into the ground. Sepha's smile flickered. He lifted a paper and tapped it with the edge of his finger. Mother, he said in a respectful tone that did not quite hide his impatience. I travel far. The road eats my time and my fuel. If we wait, your neighbor will take this chance, and I may not return before the harvest. My truck is not a river. It cannot be everywhere. He flicked his eyes briefly toward our storeroom. A good head does not let a goat loose when it can tie it with a rope. Kojo pressed his lips together. He did not like being rushed or herded. He looked at me. He looked at Ma. He looked at Sifa. He opened his hands and then closed them as if catching a fly that was not there. Come back tomorrow, he said. We will call Uncle Mensa and Auntie Abina. We will read the paper in the yard in front of whoever wishes to listen. Sepha held still for a breath. Then he let a soft laugh into the air, the kind of laugh a man uses to hide the scuff of his shoe on a step. Tomorrow is not today, he said, but he nodded, folded his paper, sucked his teeth softly as if considering the road and its bumps, and stood. He shook Kojo's hand and extended his to Ma. Ma touched his fingers politely. Then he turned to me. He held his hand out. I took it. It was warm and dry, the hand of a man who knew how to be in the shade while others stood in the sun. He climbed on his motorbike, pulled the choke, and started it. The sound cut the air, then grew small as he drove down the red path, dust rising like a thin memory behind him. When he had gone, Kojo let out a breath he had not noticed he was holding. He sat on the stool Saifa had used and looked at me. I will not sign without witness, he said, and the truth of that promise showed in his eyes like a clear pool in a dry place. I nodded, but I felt something else too, a small wind that did not belong to that day. I could not name it yet, but I felt it in my stomach the way you feel the first shift of the season before anyone else speaks about it. The elders came the next afternoon. The air was close, as if the sky had drawn its arms around the day and forgotten to let go. Clouds piled on each other like folded blankets. Sifa returned on time, only a little dust on his shoes. He greeted us all, not missing a single person, even those who hovered at the edge of the yard pretending to mind their own business. He laid the paper on the low table and, to his credit, he read the whole thing out loud in our language. He used simple words. He pointed to the parts where a number met a promise. He said clearly, "This much money now, this many sacks later at this price." His ink-stained thumb pointed to a stamp. "The chief in the next town uses this too," he said. He did not rush. When he finished, Uncle Mensa asked 3 questions. What happens if the rains come wrong and the harvest is smaller? Sepha answered, Then, according to this line, I take the harvest you have, and next year you give me the rest first before you sell to anyone else. What happens if my goat dies and I need to sell 2 sacks early to pay a doctor? Then you must tell me first. I will take those 2 sacks as payment. The rest is still mine at the price agreed. What happens if I change my mind? You do not, the elders murmured. It was not unfair, but it was tight. It was a rope. It was not a chain, but it could become one if a person fell. I felt the small wind again. It moved through my middle like a thin arm reaching for something to hold. I turned to Ma. "We could borrow from Auntie Abina," I whispered. "Or from the women's group. We could buy tin for the roof a little later. The first rains have already passed. The leaks will be fewer." Kojo must have heard me. He shook his head slightly. His eyes were on the paper. He made the small sound he made when he weighed something with his whole body. "If we agree now, we know where we stand," he said. Not to me exactly, but to himself. He looked at Sefa. "There is one more matter," he said. "The field of my sister. The stones at the west. These cannot be touched. Her first harvest is promised to the Stool. No one will truck it away. The Stool's portion goes to the shrine first." Sefa raised his hands as if washing them in air. "I am not a thief," he said and laughed. "The Stool eats first. After that, my truck can eat." He turned to me. "Sister, will you be the witness? You seem to like the way words must be clear." "I will witness," I said, "but I will also ask that we mark in the corner that any promise touching land is spoken to the Stool first. The Stool must never hear a story last." I looked at Nana Essie. She nodded once, slow, a sign that the idea did not hurt the bone of the matter. They made a note at the bottom. It was a small note. It made my breath move better in my chest. Then Kojo pressed his thumb to the ink. He pressed it to the paper. The mark looked like a leaf. Sifa added his own neat signature and an extra flourished line as if his pen had a mind of its own. I signed my name and so did Uncle Mensa. We all sat a while longer and drank water. The conversation turned to goats and price, and the way the road to the larger town had broken again after the last rain. Sefa made promises about his truck's strength the way a young man makes promises about his back. He shook our hands and left, paper folded, eyes bright. The first trouble came 3 weeks later when the rain forgot to go home. For 5 days and nights the sky poured. The ground reached up and answered with open palms. The path to the main road turned to soup. The small stream near my west boundary became a river for a day and tore wild at the banks. The contour lines we had made held like good stitches, lifting water from one part to another in a slow, holding way. But some of the beans lay with their heads down, a few uprooted by a stubborn wind. I replanted in small spaces where the roots had given up. I covered them with extra mulch. I stood in the rain and felt it want to push me backward. I said, "Not today." I dug my heels in and moved forward. Kojo's fields suffered too. The ridge at the far edge slumped in one place as if exhausted. We went together when the rain took a short breath. He carried sticks and stones. I carried the hoe. We rebuilt the ridge in the wet. We used our hands where the hoe was too clumsy. The mud crawled into our cuffs and hugged our calves. We pressed the new shape with flat palms until it held. In the pouring, we did not speak. To speak would have been to interrupt the clean conversation between our bodies and the dirt. When we finished, our hands were wrinkled like old fruit, our faces streaked, our eyes bright with the kind of tired that feels like having worked. Then, just as suddenly, the cloud's back broke. The sun startled us when it returned. The ground steamed. The plants shook themselves and stood taller. We slept the sleep of stones that night and woke with the rooster's small embarrassment at hearing his own loud voice again. The days dried. The beans grew. The maize lifted. The field looked like a cloth spread for a feast. My heart counted tender joys. The first flower, the small pods like promises tucked in, the way bees nodded at our work as if to agree. We set the date for my offering, the first Saturday after the next market. I would bring a basket to the Stool containing the first and best of what had grown, beans, maize, and 3 tender yams. We would pour water and speak gratitude. We would lay a path for the rest of the season with that one step made right. The Friday before that Saturday, Sifa returned, earlier than we had expected. He came without his motorbike this time. He arrived in a truck painted with a name that felt too big for its body. 2 men sat with him. They wore caps pushed back on their heads and smiled without showing teeth. The truck's cab smelled of petrol and a sweet, heavy scent like cheap fruit. He tapped the horn twice and called out before he had stepped down, "Friends!" There is a change. The big buyers in the town have come with new news. They want me to fill my sacks earlier to avoid traffic. We must bring forward our agreement. We will go before other villages disturb the road. I am fair. You know me. Kojo came to the yard quickly. He wiped his hands on a cloth. He looked at the sky and then at Sefa's truck. The harvest is not yet ready, he said. We have not picked. We have not dried. Our deal is not to sell green. We will not ruin our own food. It is not green, Sefa said brightly. It is only eager. He spread his hands as if the maize itself had asked to ride in his truck. Plus, the price is the price on the paper. This is not a cheat. We will help you carry. We will bring more hands. Ma stood at the door. Her face did not change, but she moved her body a little so that she stood between the truck and the short hallway that led to the storeroom. It was a small action that said simply, "We decide here." I stepped from the side where I had been listening. Tomorrow I make my offering, I said. The stool eats first. My throat felt dry even though the day held water in the air. Sefa's smile flicked. He looked at his men and then at me and spoke as if telling a child she had misunderstood a proverb. Sister, the stool will eat. But it will eat after the truck has been fed because the truck must leave to feed many mouths. He glanced at Kojo quickly, measuring something I could not see. Kojo held up his hand. We made an agreement for a day, not today, he said. His voice had no anger. It had a new firmness. We will not break the stool's meal. Sefa's smile thinned like a shadow when the sun moves. He shifted his weight. He clicked his tongue softly. He lowered his voice. Friend Kojo, he said, you are a good man. You have the paper. I have the stamp. If I go to the town and say this house breaks deals, it will not be nice. The next time you need a fair price, who will listen? He pulled a small folded paper from his pocket and held it with 2 fingers. Also, there is this clause you do not notice. He showed a paragraph that had a twist in it like the thin twist in the tail of a lizard. It said, in the words he chose, that if there was heavy rain and the buyer feared a poor harvest, he could call the purchase early to protect his money. Kojo's face changed. He searched his memory of that reading day, how he had wanted to seem wise and steady in front of his neighbors, and had let Sefa's words carry him forward like a river carries a leaf. He closed his eyes for half a breath. You fear a poor harvest? He asked. Look, he opened his palm toward our fields. We have beans standing full. The maize cobs are thick. The rain, yes, it came hard. But the sun returned. Our plants are fine. Sefa shrugged in a way that did not apologize. I fear what I fear, he said lightly. If I wait, the road will break. The truck will carry air instead of food. My money will sit and gather dust like a careless pot. And there is the small matter of the extra line we added to the bottom. The stool must hear. If the stool hears, perhaps it tells you to be fair to me, as I have been fair with you. He lifted his chin toward the shrine room. He tossed my own caution gently back into my lap, the way a man throws a pebble to make a splash near your feet without warning. Ma made a small sound, not a sigh, but the beginning of one. Kojo's jaw tightened. His eyes shifted, not with shame this time, but with a strong pull in 2 directions. He looked at me. For a moment, the old panic rose in him, the kind that told him he must hold everything or everything would run away. He swallowed it. He shook his head. We will not give the stool second food, he said. If you are sure of your fairness, Sefa, then you will allow it to sit. Sefa spread his fingers again and laughed a little. Trust is expensive, he said. I will go with you to the tree, but if the stool says it favors our agreement today, then your hands must move quick. My truck is not patient. We walked together to the space under the silk cotton tree. The sky had drawn a thin veil of cloud. The air smelled of damp rope and leaves. The elders came when called. Their faces had the kind of tired you carry when the same lesson comes again to a place you thought had learned it. But there was no annoyance. There was only readiness to help. The stool was brought out, the white cloth lifted, the smooth seat cool in the shade. The calabash of water made a circle of light on the mat. The wind in the high branches was quiet as if keeping the room in a house that had lost its roof. We greeted the old ones. We called the names. We described our place in this moment. Kojo did not hide the part where the paper had wrapped a tight rope around his thumb. He did not try to put the rope in my hand or my mother's hand. He held it up and said, "I tied this without seeing all of its length." Sifa looked bored for a heartbeat and then alert again, as if he had remembered he was not in the yard but in a place with different rules. Nana Essie tapped her staff. "We will test words," she said. "Not to shame but to sort. Son Sefa," she said, and her use of son for him was both generous and a tiny net. "Will you place your hand under this bowl while I ask a question clean as a blade? Did you hide this clause from their ears when you first read the paper in this yard?" Sifa smiled with effort, as if his lips were tight with thread, not willing to move how he wished. He knelt. He slid his hand under the stool and felt the weight of the water above. He looked at the bowl as if it had insulted him gently. "I read the whole paper," he said. "My mouth spoke every line." "Yes," said Nana Essie. "Did your mouth speak the clause in such a way that it stood bright, or did it carry it with dull breath among other lines where ears would be tired?" Sifa's eyes flicked to the side. The bowl made a minute tremble. The water answered. The elders saw, the people around us, even those who did not know how to read, knew how to read that movement. It was not magic. It was the weight of a thing meeting a truth and showing the invisible in a very small gesture. "I did not hide it," Sifa said. "I did not polish it. I spoke it as I spoke the other parts." "Which is like hiding it under a hat," murmured Uncle Mensa. "Not to scold, but to name what we saw." "Now," said Nana Essie, "do you fear a poor harvest as you claim?" Sefa looked at the sky. He looked at the field. He looked at the bowl. His hand was steady with practice. He knew how to hold a story in place. He had sold many stories. "I fear my truck will be late," he said. "I fear others will take what I came for first. The road eats me." The bowl did not move. Fear is fear. He had told a truth, if not the first one. Nana Essie nodded and turned to Kojo. "Son," she said, "did you understand this clause when you put your thumb to the ink?" "No," Kojo said. His voice was low and tired. "I did not. I was proud. I wanted to prove my head had grown steady. I thought if I asked for more time in the reading I would look small. I was wrong. The bowl didn't need to speak to this." He had not placed his hand beneath it. He had placed his heart on the ground. It lay there like a quiet thing that is now seen. I felt a heat rise behind my eyes. "And daughter," she said, looking at me, "did you witness with a whole attention, or did you let your mind travel when you trusted what you wanted to hear?" "I witnessed," I said. "I asked for the note about the stool. I was careful, but I did not force us to rest before we moved. I let the stranger's speed press us. I wanted to be done with the matter." She nodded once as if to say, "We are all pulled by the same rope sometimes." She sat back for a breath and let the space settle. Then she spoke, words slow and heavy enough to land but not heavy enough to bruise. "Listen, paper is good. It keeps memory from pretending it is strong when it is weak. But paper is not head. Paper cannot feel shame when it tightens a noose around a house. The stool is not paper. It is not a knife or a rope. It is a mirror." She looked at Sefa. "You have not done a crime. You have done a business in a way that serves you first. You have used words as a mat under the legs of your table so it does not wobble. We see you. We respect the work you do. We also ask you to respect the work we do with our own bodies. The rain was hard. It did not break us. We will not break ourselves today to calm your fear for tomorrow." She lifted a hand, not to command, but to mark the path. "Here is what the stool offers as a fair road. The stool will eat first tomorrow as promised. The truck will eat next, but not green. You will take only what has been dried properly by the next market day. You will accept a small delay, and I will send a boy with you to show the back road where your wheels will not sink. For the clause about fear of poor harvest, you may place that fear down on the mat. The harvest is not poor enough to require early clawing." Sifa opened his mouth. He saw something of his own reflection in the elders' faces and closed it. "I will lose money," he said, but his voice did not stretch to a shout. It bent around the truth like a tree around a rock. "You will keep your name." said Nana Essie. That is the finer cloth. She turned to Kojo. And you, son, will not place your thumb on paper that touches your mother and sister without first sitting with 3 elders until their bones grow stiff. You will make a rule in your own head. No paper presses your skin until the stool hears its footsteps. She tapped her staff lightly. Write that inside your chest. He nodded. I will. He looked at Sifa. I will help you carry when the time comes, he added. I will lend your men my hands. We will keep our side. Sifa looked at the bowl again, the quiet water, the calm weight. He made a long sigh through his nose and then a short laugh without joy. Old ways, he said, shaking his head. But he looked at the people gathered in the circle, at their faces, at their certainty that we belong to each other more than we belong to a machine or a word printed in a dark room. He saw his own advantage in being known as a man who could be worked with again. He nodded. All right, he said. 1 week. He held up a finger. 1. He took a breath. But you will make me tea when I come. The last was a joke. A patch on a torn place. We will make you tea, I said. And the circle's tension loosened itself like a rope untied. Sifa's truck turned and left. The dust behind it lifted and settled. The people drifted with the same rhythm. The stool went back to its quiet place. We walked home. My lungs felt used but clean. That evening I went to the field and walked the rows with bare feet. The soil gave a little under my weight. The beans were ready to begin. Their pods hung like hands full of news. I touched each plant and said softly, tomorrow. The stars came early, small and bright as pinholes in a black cloth. From the far path, a dog barked twice and then thought better of it. The air smelled of leaves drying and wood smoke from a neighbor's fire. When morning pulled itself over the world, we rose and dressed. I wore the blue cloth I had kept for good work, the one with simple white lines. Ma wrapped herself in white that made her look like the inside of a cloud. Kojo put on the shirt he had once saved for festivals and did not try to hide the fact that he wished to be seen at the stool as a man who keeps his word. We carried baskets, the one for the stool, which would hold the first beans, not the biggest but the truest, a small measure of maize, and 3 small yams with smooth skins and no bruise. I tied a second cloth around the offering bowl so that the smell of the field would not draw impatient hands from children who might walk with us out of curiosity. We did not go alone. Auntie Abina joined us, her bracelets singing. Uncle Mensa walked slowly with his hat tilted back. Even Yaw came, a sign that he had put his earlier pettiness down someplace we would not stumble over. As we moved through the yard, 2 children began a soft song without words. The notes carried us the way a well-placed hand carries a slow dancer. Under the tree, the stool sat in patient light. We placed the basket on a cloth near its feet. We poured a small libation of clean water on the ground and spoke the words our fathers and mothers had spoken. Gratitude for rain. Thanks for strength. Memory of those who moved before we did, who carried heavier loads with less help. We did not ask for much. We asked to be kept in our right minds. We asked to be steady under the weight of good news and bad. We asked to remember to share without counting too hard. Then we sat for a short time, the way you sit after a good meal. The elders smiled with their eyes. Ma's shoulders dropped as if someone had lifted a basket from them. I felt the tightness in my chest open, and air came free and wide as the river in the dry months. Through the branches, a patch of blue sky shone as if the day had made a window there just for us. After we carried the stool back to the shrine room and turned toward home, a small boy in a red shirt darted out from behind the wall near my field. He ran fast, then slower as if his legs had forgotten why they were running. He held his breath tight and looked back over his shoulder twice like a rabbit unsure of the grass to choose. His name was Kwame. He was one of the children who collected fallen mangoes from the path and sold them to women on the road to the market. He was thin in the way some boys are thin from running, not from not eating, but today his thinness looked worried. He did not see me until I stepped aside to let him pass. He startled and dropped something from his shirt. It made a small thump in the dirt and rolled. It was a handful of green beans still in their pods, the small ends wet where they had torn from the plant. His mouth opened as if to shape a story he had not practiced. He looked not at the beans, but at my eyes. "Kwame," I said, and my voice was the voice I use for a sleeping child in a house that is too loud. "What have you there?" He crouched and scooped them quickly, his fingers working too fast. "Auntie," he said, "I only took what the field would not miss." The words came out in a rush, tripping over each other. He did not look at my face. He looked at my feet. I did not reach for his hand or for the beans. I crouched too so that my eyes could pick a path to his. "Are you hungry?" I asked. He shook his head, then nodded, then shook it again. "My sister," he said, "her baby's cough does not stop. They said beans would make milk come. The baby's mouth is always open like a chick. She cries when it is nothing. She cries when it is something. My sister's eyes are dry. I am tired of the crying." He swallowed hard. "I thought I could take from the end of the row where maybe you would not notice today because the singing has made everyone look up." His honesty came like rain through a torn roof. Sudden, cold, clean. He tried to push the beans into his shirt again, fumbling. "Walk with me," I said. I stood and held out my hand. He hesitated, then took it. His hand was hot and light. We went together to the field. Kojo followed a few steps behind, then stopped and let me lead. He had learned some parts of himself out loud. This part he now learned to keep quiet until called, to watch his sister work a problem and not put his hand in her bowl without asking. At the edge of the field, I knelt near the first row. "Kwame," I said, "the field is our mother. We ask her before we take. We do not creep up and snatch. We do not do to our mother what a hawk does to a chick. Do you know?" He nodded fast. His cheeks went red under his dark skin. He bent his head. "Look with me," I said. "These plants here." I touched the ones nearest the edge. "They have struggled because the path is hard on them. If we pick from the center today, we injure our middle so early that the edges will not be enough. If we leave this row that you touched, you will see it will recover, but your sister needs milk now." He nodded again, quick small jerks, like something that had learned to agree so that the world would not be too hard on it. "Sit," I said. He sat. I walked down 2 rows and picked carefully from plants that were ready, the ones whose pods had thickened and whose flowers had already given all they could. I filled the small bowl I had brought for insects, only this time it held beans, good ones, and it held them in a way that did not wound the field. I came back and set the bowl in his lap. He tried to speak. I lifted my hand for him to be still. "You will take these to your sister," I said. "You will help her cook them soft. You will carry water for her. You will come back this afternoon and pull weeds with me for 2 hours. You will be paid with a handful of beans every day for 5 days. You will learn where to pick and how to leave food for tomorrow." His eyes changed. The panic left and something else came, a careful light. He looked at Kojo, then at me, then down at the ground. "Yes," he said, and his voice had weight for the first time since he ran into the yard. He stood, clutching the bowl with both hands, and started to run, then checked himself and walked, concentrating, like a man carrying a baby. Kojo exhaled gently. He touched my shoulder. "You teach better than a stick," he said. "I learned from sticks too," I said, and our eyes both went to the shrine room for a moment without us meaning them to. The stool did not solve the bean problem, but there was a way of seeing that we had learned at its side. That way of seeing had moved into our hands. That week passed full and fast. We harvested with care. We dried the beans on mats, turned them with wooden spoons, breathed the clean, green smell that rose when sun met fresh plant. We listened for the first rattle inside the pods that said a seed was not just a soft promise anymore. We spread the maize and covered it when a short rain came like a visit from a friend who forgot to check the time. Saifa returned a day later than he had asked, which shamed his boast a little, but we did not say so. We served him tea that tasted of mint from the garden, not too sweet. He sent his men to lift. They stepped where we had not placed mats, and I corrected them with a smile and a pointed finger. They adjusted and did not take offense. When the truck was loaded, we stood together and counted sacks. Kojo counted aloud, his voice easy. Sifa counted in his head, his lips moving. The numbers matched. He gave Kojo the amount written in his paper. He counted it twice. Kojo handed part of it to me in full sight of all, the part that covered my seed and my share for the house. A clean thing. No shame, no hidden palm. He placed coins in Ma's lap too, because a house led well by a mother must feel its own resources under its fingers. When Sepha was ready to go, he hesitated by the truck's door. He looked at me. "You did not ask for extra," he said. "You could have asked for girls' money just because I'm in your yard and do not want to argue here." "You did not." His voice had no sharpness. "Fairness is its own reward," I said, and it sounded like a proverb someone had carved on a spoon a long time ago. He laughed softly. He got in the truck and left, dust lifting, dust settling. The weeks turned. The beans kept giving. The maize sweetened and hardened. The yams grew fat under their mounds. Work done in secret that you trust before you can see. Kwame came each afternoon, muddy or dusty depending on what the sky had decided, and worked with me. He learned the gentle twist that releases a pod without tearing the stem. He learned the difference between a weed that hides and a baby plant that pretends to be one. He learned to wash hands before touching the harvest. He came one day with his small sister on his hip, her eyes clearer, her cough less fierce. He stood at the field's edge and lifted her hand with his and waved as if the plants were people. "Say thank you," he whispered into her ear. She gurgled and kicked her feet. "Thank you comes in many forms. We were not free of trouble. No one ever is." Once, a group of laughing boys passed our field and threw stones at a bird for sport as it pecked at a fallen cob. I called them back, made them walk to the shrine room and stand outside while I pushed the door open and let the cool air meet their foolish heat. I did not sit. I did not ask them to sit. I had them look in and see the stool glimmer in the dim light as if wood could hold a river. "There is a rule of this house," I said. "We do not throw anger where food grows. The stool does not enjoy jokes that harm. You will leave a small bundle of firewood by my mother's door and to sweep the path from this field to the road so that your care for our work will wipe away your carelessness. Then go. Boys who do not learn to pull their bodies back from waste grow into men who waste." They did what I asked. They spoke softer in the yard after that. One of them came back a week later and asked, with shy eyes, for seeds for his own little bed at home. I gave him a handful and showed him how to fold them in a scrap of cloth to keep them dry. The biggest test came at the very end of the season, when the harvest sat in bags and baskets like well-fed children, and we felt tired the way you feel after a long dance, breathless, happy, sore. The man with the papers returned again, this time with a different face. Sepha had sent a helper in his place. A quiet man with a thin scar on his cheek that looked like someone had drawn a line on him with a crooked pencil. He brought a new paper. He said the price had changed in the bigger town and that we must adjust. He did not smile. He did not make jokes about tea. He had the energy of a man who had been told to make a number match, a number, no matter how he did it. He laid the paper on the table and slid it toward Kojo. He kept his fingers on the edge like he feared the wind might take it and save us both from the conversation. "Only a small change," he said. "Our error from before? We must reduce by 2 coins per sack to balance the book." He did not look at me. He did not look at the shrine room. He watched the paper like a hungry cat watching a fish on a plate. Kojo did not touch the paper. He put his hands behind his back and stood the way our father used to when he made a decision he knew would not please everyone. "No," he said. "We have already made the exchange. We have counted, we have paid, we have parted. The stool ate its portion. The truck ate its portion. The house stands. You will not feed on what has been digested." The man lifted his eyebrows as if Kojo had used a word from a language he did not speak. "I have a letter signed by your friend," he said. He tapped the paper. "We will come to the chief in town if we must. If you have ever seen a small flame meet a dry leaf, you will understand what came next." Kojo turned to him very slowly. He did not raise his voice. "We are not fish on your plate," he said. "You cannot eat us twice." The man's mouth pressed into a line. He stood, tucked the paper away angrily as if he could cram it into a pocket and make it hurt. "I will return," he said. He thrust his chin forward the way a boy does when he pretends to be taller. He left. His shoes quickened their steps when he reached the path. We did not run after him. We did not ask the stool to settle a matter that had already been settled. We went inside, closed the door behind us, and sat with our backs touching the wall. Ma poured water into 3 cups. We drank. The water tasted like the kind that comes when a cloud finally remembers the ground. "He will go to the chief of his town," she said. "The chief does not sit under our tree. He may listen to your name and not our story." Her voice was not afraid. It was simply making the ground plain. "Then we will carry our story there," I said. "Not because we love to walk for nothing. Because if a rope tries to pull me back, I will put my heel on it and call people to see. There are ways to share truth even in a place where the stool does not sit." I thought of our radio. It stood quiet in its corner, a thing made far from us that had learned to be polite before our pot. The next day, before the heat had found its strength, we went to the larger town. We did not go alone. Uncle Mensa came. So did 2 women from our sewing group. So did a young teacher who lived near the school and knew how to read quickly without being tricked by neat ink. We wore our clothes clean and carried our dignity like a bowl we did not wish to spill. The town had noise that pressed against the ears, the shouting of sellers, the clatter of metal, a bus overly proud of its horn. The chief's place sat under a wide sheet of tin that had been nailed over rafters so neatly that you could see the care in each nail's small circle. The floor had been swept again and again until it held stories of all the feet that had rubbed it clean. We found Sifa there before us. He stood to one side, not ashamed to show that his home was in rooms like this, rooms where men waited to be called, where the order was written on paper and hung on a wall. He looked at us without spite. He raised his eyebrows slightly as if asking why we had brought so many people with so few words to spend. The chief of that town was a man with a wide brow and careful eyes. He listened to his attendant whisper in his ear and then spoke to us. His voice was full, not heavy. "What is your quarrel?" he asked. He did not rub his eyes as if he is often bored by such matters. He sat forward a little, as if he understood that we came because we could not carry this one quietly any longer. Sefa's man presented the new paper. He explained in a voice that sounded like the edge of a new tin. He used words like standard and policy and correction. He did not say we are poor at knowing how to ask forgiveness. He did not think he needed to. He turned and pointed to Kojo with a small and insulted hand. "They agreed," he said, implying we had agreed to be easily taught regret in the wrong place. Kojo stepped forward. He did not bow low. He did not stand too straight. He greeted the chief. He told the story in the way I had told it beneath our tree, with bones in it. He said where we had been wrong. He said where Sefa had been wrong. He did not name the helper except as a helper. He did not show his own shame as if it were a plan. He placed the truth in the open and let it breathe. The young teacher cleared his throat and offered to read both papers, the first and the second. He did so with calm, careful pace. He made no faces when he read the twist. He read the note we had added about the stool's hearing. He read the dates and the names. He put the papers down as if they were simply papers, not shouting people. The chief listened. He asked 3 questions, small ones that opened the larger thing. Had the first exchange been completed? Had the stool received its portion? Had the second paper been signed? The answers were yes, yes, no. The chief nodded. He looked at Sefa with eyes that had known men like him since he was a boy. He did not scold. He did not praise. He did the small work of smoothing a cloth that had wrinkled in transport. "The first exchange is finished," he said. "You cannot take back food you have eaten. The second paper you bring is a kite without string. It cannot fly in my yard. If you wish to find a better nest for your business, then tie your strings better next time. Read slowly. Speak slowly. Sit with the stools where you go, and if you wish to stand again in this place, do not send a man who cannot smile to carry your words for you." Sefa did not argue. His eyes, for the first time, smiled on their own, a small, weary curve. "Fair," he said. He turned to Kojo. Forgive my push, he said. He did not mean I will never push again. He meant I know you watched. Good. Watch again. We left the town with our small group and walked past the stalls where women slapped dough against metal pans and fried little breads that smelled like morning. The teacher bought one for each of us with his small money. Victory food, he joked, then grew serious. No, not victory. Just good bread. We ate. We walked home. In the yard, the sun waited like a patient friend. The field did not ask questions. It simply grew. Ma swept the floor as if to welcome the space we had brought back. At the radio corner, I set a small sprig of mint in a cup. It made the air smell cool even before we opened the door in the evening. We lived that season through to the end. There was enough for our bowls and for the bowls of 2 families who had lost a father and could not plant enough in time. There was enough for seeds to carry over. There was enough for joy. A new drum joined the old ones in our neighbor's yard when his daughter was named. I sewed a bag for Auntie Abena with bits of bright cloth from her bundle. Kwame's sister's baby grew round-cheeked and learned to laugh. The young boys who had thrown stones learned to throw seeds and to aim for small holes with pride in their carefulness. The mason past our house lifted a hand and said, "The wall stayed straight through that last storm." He was proud, not of his work alone, but of the way we had learned to stand under it without tilting our heads. One evening, when the crickets tuned their song and the last light turned the leaves gold, Kojo called me to the veranda. He had placed his father's old stool where our father used to sit. He had not moved the ancestor's stool. This was the everyday seat with the curved legs and the shine from years of hands. He sat on the step instead, his back to the pillar, and patted the space on the step beside him. I sat. He turned a small packet in his hands, nervous. He cleared his throat. "I sold the watch," he said. I looked at his bare wrist. "I noticed," I said with a smile. "You check the sun now." He laughed softly. "I sold it to pay the last of the mason's fee because I realized I wanted that wall more than I wanted a tick on my wrist." He looked at me. "I do not say this so you will praise me. I say it because I feel something." The watch did not help me keep promises. The stool, my breath, my mother's eyes, those helped me. The watch made me count the wrong things. We sat without speaking. The moths came and bumped against the lamp. The night smelled like fresh-cut wood and roasted pepper. The river somewhere down the hill made the same old sound. Then he spoke again, a quiet question in his voice. "Do you think Father would be proud of how we brought our matters to the stool?" he asked. I did not answer at once. I thought of our father's hands, how they moved slow and did not point much. I thought of his eyebrows lifting when a child said something true. "I think he would ask for a bowl of water," I said, and he would ask to feel it in his palm, and he would say, "It is cool," and he would mean, "The house is cool." He would be proud that we found the cool. Kojo nodded. He made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sigh. His shoulders dropped. "I am learning to be a door," he said. "Not a wall." "You are," I said. The words sat easy in my mouth, and their taste was good. I did not know then that another test was walking toward us with soft feet. Tests do not always bang on a gate. Sometimes they come like a neighbor who has lost a friend and only wishes to sit and share tea in the doorway, and along the way they ask for a seat you did not think you had to give. I did not know. I slept that night with the window open. The moon sat with its elbow on the sill again. An old friend turned toward us. A week later, on a morning cut clear as a fresh slice of yam, a runner came from the far end of the village. His chest lifted fast. He slowed when he reached our gate, bent, and placed his hands on his knees. "Mother," he said to Ma between breaths, "your sister in the next village fell. Her hip is bad. She needs you." Ma lifted one hand to her breast and closed her eyes a moment. Then she began to gather what she needed. A small bag with cloth, a calabash cup, a jar of palm oil, dried leaves folded in paper, a tiny gourd of herbs from the shrine. She moved without hurry, without panic. She has always known how to put her feet down the center of a road when it splits in two. She turned to us. "Kojo," she said, "you will keep the house. Amma, you will keep our sister's field and yours. I will be gone for 7 days. The stool will watch your heads." We nodded. We walked her to the path. We watched her shrink as she moved away under the trees. The morning light touched the top of her head, and she looked for a moment like a small river of white cloth moving toward a place where old pain waited for new hands. We returned to the yard in a quiet that held us and did not crush. The work grew. It grew in mass and in meaning, the way a fire grows when you add logs and people add stories to the circle beside it. We rose earlier. We slept later. We did not let our voices grow sharp out of tiredness. We moved with the careful speed of people who carry a bowl of soup through a crowded room. On the fourth day, the trouble with Sifa, which we thought had turned its face away from us for a time, sent a small shadow over our threshold. Not from him, from others whose eyes had watched our yard all season, men who wanted to be him, men who had learned to use paper like people use hunger. They came with a new ink, a new stamp, and the same logic. They came when we were weary. They came when Ma's soft eyes were away. They came with flattery and urgency and said we could have a new gate, a new lock, a new shine for our name if only we would put our thumb here. Now, while their truck waited under a tree where the sun could not harm it, we did not open the gate. We did not argue. We asked them to sit under the silk cotton tree and wait. We called the elders. We brought the stool. We folded our hands and told the story again for people who had not learned it, and perhaps would not. We learned our own strength in a new way, not by saying no with a shout, but by letting the stool say no through our steady practice. When the new men realized the stool was not a wooden token but a way of keeping people whole, they left, not angry, only disappointed, like hunters who had misread a trail. There was no triumph in it. There was only the quiet relief of a door that had been tested and had not flown off its hinges. On the seventh day, the runner returned with Ma. She walked carefully, a little tired, but she kept her smile. Her sister would live. The hip was bound. The pain had been eased with hands and herbs and patient voices. We sat on the veranda. We made her the tea we made for Sifa and his men. The taste of it seemed to move the lines on her face in a kinder direction. "You kept the house," she said. "The house kept you?" "Yes," we said. "That harvest I set aside the part I promised to the stool from my field. We brought it with care each time the season gave something new. We did not bruise it with hurry." Kojo walked with me on those mornings. We did not make speeches. We simply placed the basket where it needed to be, we poured the water, and we kept our heads at the right angle to remember we were not alone in our own stories. In the evenings, sometimes when the radio fell quiet and the crickets coined their song from nothing, I thought about how easily we had all been pulled toward a new kind of rope. I thought of the watch on Kojo's wrist and of his bare skin now. I thought of Sifa's smile, its quick calculation, and the way it had softened for a breath when the chief had asked his questions. I thought of boys who throw stones and then learn to throw seeds, and the way that change feels in the body. I thought of the stool and of the cool floor of the shrine room and of the moth, that night, that had landed on the window and shivered for a moment as if even small insects sometimes bring their worries to a place older than their own. Wings. One more thing was about to arrive in our yard. Before the season turned, a thing that would test our patience again, not in the form of paper or pushy men, but as a dream wrapped in bright colors and a promise tied with thin string. It would walk in wearing a city shirt and smiling with the desire to make everyone taller than they truly are. It would ask Kojo, and through him, all of us, to become something too quickly. It would stir our peace in a way that looked like progress and smelled like smoke. But that friend belongs to the next piece of our story, the one that shows how the stool can carry not only heavy trouble but heavy hope, and how fear wears many faces, one of them very handsome, one of them named like a harvest that comes too soon. The dream wore a clean shirt and shoes that did not yet know our dust. It came in a white van with a blue stripe painted along its side, with a name in bold letters that made its own trumpet in the sun. Early Dawn. The van stopped at the head of our road one late morning when shadows were short and the smell of roasted cassava drifted from a neighbor's fire. 2 men stepped down and 1 woman. Their clothes shone in a way that cloth does when it has only known pressed rooms and not kitchens or fields. The woman wore a simple scarf and steady eyes. The taller man carried a folder thick with papers that flashed like fish scales when the sun found them. The other man, the one who began to wave before he was close enough to greet, was a cousin from my mother's side we had not seen in 2 years. His name was Prosper. Family, he called with a smile that tried to touch every face at once. Family, the city has brought its light. He hugged Ma with quick arms, then held her shoulders and looked into her face as if counting the new lines and blessing them. He shook Kojo's hand like a drum, both hands wrapping one arm. He turned to me, paused, and opened his arms again. Sister Amma, he said, I hear you have made the ground love you. Good. The ground loves the brave. Welcome, I said. Sit. The wind carried your name to us before you came. I meant the radio and a rumor. The week before, we had heard of vans like this one visiting neighboring villages. Some had been pleased. Some had frowned and kept their smiles to themselves. Prosper's smile widened. He gestured to the woman and the tall man. This is Abina, he said, and this is Mr. Tano. They are from Early Dawn Seed Company. I am their coordinator for this area now, a bridge between family and future. See? He tapped the words on the van and winked. He spread a colorful poster on our low table. It showed a field so green it seemed almost untrue, a man and woman standing in it with baskets so full they looked heavy, yet the pair smiled without sweat. The words said, Harvest in 60 days. He tapped the numbers with pride. We bring a new kind of seed, he said, quick and generous. It does not wait like an old man for his cane. It rises. We will help you plan. We will bring fertilizer on credit. We will buy the harvest at a fair price. You will not struggle in the lean months like before. This variety comes fast. Early dawn. We named it for mornings like this. His words were like sweet bananas given to a child who has eaten plain porridge for many days, tempting, filling, and easy to swallow too quickly. The tall man, Mr. Tano, opened his folder. He had a voice that smoothed itself as it went, like oil poured from a bottle. We also build community, he said. We want a resource center here, a shed with a tin roof, a shade where we can train. You, Kojo, you will be our lead farmer, he smiled. We pay a small honorarium. We bring a badge so people know who to ask. He lifted a badge already printed with a blank space for a name. Kojo's eyes softened at the edges, and not only because of the badge. He is a man who carries responsibility with his bones. To be a lead farmer sounded like a place where his strength could sit. The air around us felt thicker, full of the promise of easy bread. And to honor your history, Mr. Tano added, taking a breath as if he were about to place a sweet fruit in our hands, we would like to feature your ancestor stool in our materials. Such a beautiful symbol. We can borrow it for a week for a photo in the town. We can place it on our brochure so that other villages see that we respect spirit as well as soil. He smiled again, as if he had said the best part. I felt my skin tighten, as if a wind had turned direction too fast. Ma's face did not change, but her hands folded themselves, fingers pressing into palm. Kojo's lips parted and then closed. Prosper, seeing our stillness, waved his hand as if brushing away a fly. It is only a picture, he said. We will treat it like a king. We will even return with a gift. Paint for the shrine room, perhaps. Or a little money for school books. We do not come empty. The dream wore a clean shirt and shoes that did not yet know our dust. It came in a white van with a blue stripe painted along its side, with a name in bold letters that made its own trumpet in the sun. Early Dawn. The van stopped at the head of our road one late morning when shadows were short and the smell of roasted cassava drifted from a neighbor's fire. 2 men stepped down and 1 woman. Their clothes shone in a way that cloth does when it has only known pressed rooms and not kitchens or fields. The woman wore a simple scarf and steady eyes. The taller man carried a folder thick with papers that flashed like fish scales when the sun found them. The other man, the one who began to wave before he was close enough to greet, was a cousin from my mother's side we had not seen in 2 years. His name was Prosper. Family, he called with a smile that tried to touch every face at once. Family, the city has brought its light. He hugged Ma with quick arms, then held her shoulders and looked into her face as if counting the new lines and blessing them. He shook Kojo's hand like a drum, both hands wrapping one arm. He turned to me, paused, and opened his arms again. "Sister Amma," he said, "I hear you have made the ground love you. Good. The ground loves the brave." "Welcome," I said. "Sit. The wind carried your name to us before you came." I meant the radio and a rumor. The week before, we had heard of vans like this one visiting neighboring villages. Some had been pleased. Some had frowned and kept their smiles to themselves. Prosper rubbed his palms together, one in joy, one in impatience. "Good," he said. "Gather all people. Let us sing." He looked at the silk cotton tree that held the morning like a shawl. "We can even hold the training under that tree," he added. "We will clear the small old stones and make space. We will hang a banner between the low branches. Early dawn coming to meet old wisdom. How is that?" He spread his hands to measure the space. "Do not say we will clear old stones," Ma said, quiet, her voice round and still. "Some stones hold names you do not know." Prosper's smile thinned for a breath, then widened again. He patted his folder as if it were a horse that needed to be steady. "As you wish, Mother," he said and bowed his head. He could be polite when needed. He was not a man with claws. He was a man with a broom that pushed hard. We agreed to meet under the silk cotton tree the next afternoon, when shade would be generous and attention would not be cracked by the noon heat. The van left a trail of glittering dust that settled slowly, like thoughts trying to find their places in our minds. At noon, we ate boiled plantain with groundnut stew. It tasted like everyday food and steadied us. Kojo wiped his bowl with a piece of plantain and then set it down. "Lead farmer," he said softly, as if testing his mouth around the shape of that pride. He looked at me. "Is there a way for us to take only what is good in this and leave what would break us? The fast seed could bridge the hunger days." "Perhaps," I said, "if it does not drive us into a field with no return. If debt is not the rope tied quietly around our ankles before we begin. If the stool sits with us first." I remembered the radio program about soil that we had listened to one evening, the woman's voice explaining the hunger a ground feels when the same crop drinks from it again and again. I remembered her calm advice: add compost, rest a piece of land, plant pairs that help each other. Do not be dazzled by speed if it costs you your next season. That night, the radio, as if it were a neighbor who had read our thoughts, carried a program about seed. A farmer from another region spoke about early varieties that saved his family in a dry year, and another man, a teacher, spoke of companies who asked farmers to buy seed every season, promising miracles and forgetting to say that miracles need water and soil like any other plant. They both spoke in simple words. "Learn the name of each seed as you would learn the name of a child," the teacher said. "Ask who its parents are. Ask if it will make children of its own or if it is a single bright guest at your table who must be invited again and again at a price." We let the radio rest. After it gave us that, and we sat a long time without speaking, the next afternoon, the place under the silk cotton tree filled with our people, the way a good place fills when there is both worry and hope. The light came through the leaves in broken gold. The goats did not wander near. The stool came out of the shrine room and sat on the mat in the reserved way it always had. Not proud, not shy, simply present. When the cloth lifted, the small cool in the air touched my cheeks. Children at the edge held each other's hands as if entering a story. Prosper stood near with his bright poster rolled in one hand. Beside him, Mr. Tano balanced a folder on his palm. Abina stood a pace behind them, her eyes watchful and kind. We called the names. We greeted the old ones. The elders blessed the ground. The bowl of water found its place on the stool. A white chalk line was drawn to mark the space between wishes and wisdom. There is comfort in repeating the right forms. They carry the heart across uneasy water. "Speak," said Nana Essie, her staff planted in the soil like a narrow tree. "Bring your dream. Bend its head so we can see its face." Prosper stepped forward with his usual bright energy. "We want to help," he began. "Early dawn brings fast seed that can grow in 60 days. We offer training in your own yard, under your own tree, led by your own son, our new lead farmer. We offer fertilizer that you can pay for after harvest. We buy the harvest at a good price." He left out the part about the stool photo. He had learned to test waters. He looked at me and then at Ma and spoke carefully, as if laying a basket down instead of throwing it. The elders nodded. They were not swept. They were not turned away. They asked the questions that held the important things up to light. "If our people plant your seed," asked Uncle Mensa, "can they save seed for next year?" Mr. Tano smiled. "These are improved," he said. "They are F1 hybrids. If you save them, their children will not be the same. We recommend that you buy fresh each season for best results." The bowl made the smallest echo on the wood, a hum you could almost not hear. Truth, but truth that walked with a cost others might pretend to ignore. The words "children will not be the same" held a weight that did not fit easily in our mouths. "If we do not buy your fertilizer?" asked another elder, a quiet man whose eyes had been trained on soil all his life. "Can we still plant your seed with our compost and cow dung?" "Yes," said Abena before Mr. Tano could speak. "Yes, but the yield will be less. The seed asks for food?" She said the word "asks" in a way that made it clear the seed did not ask politely. It asked like a stomach. "If we sign to be part of your program," said Auntie Abena, Bangles singing, "do we have to sell all to you? Or can we sell to others as well? Can we eat the better part?" "Exclusivity helps us cover our risk," said Mr. Tano, the oil in his voice finding a small stone. "But in this area, for this season, we can negotiate that half goes to us, half is yours to use as you wish." He looked at Prosper. Prosper nodded, eager to show that he could bring a yes. "Your resource center," said Nana Essie. "Where?" Prosper lifted his poster and with it his hand. He pointed under the silk cotton tree without thinking, the way a man uses his finger to push a seed into a hole that is not ready. "Here," he said, then, seeing the faces, lowered his hand and pointed toward the side of our yard. "Or there," he said quickly. "Under any tree you like." "Not under this tree," said Ma. "And not touching stones that carry names. And not asking the stool to be a picture on your paper." Abena's eyes moved to the stool. She bowed her head and stepped forward. She bent her knee and placed her hand on the ground. "We will not move it," she said. "We will not place our name on it. I do not wish any prophet to sleep badly because of us." The slight humor lightened the air. Even Nana Essie breathed out a small sound that might have become a laugh in another second. "And," said Uncle Mensa, his voice level, "your badge for our son, does it carry his head higher in the right way? Or does it put a rope at his waist tied to a timetable in a building far away?" The question slipped into the circle like a small fish, and then flashed its back quickly so all could see it. Kojo stepped forward before Prosper could. He held out his hands empty. "I like to carry what helps others," he said. "I do not like ropes. If I am to be led farmer, I will be the kind that walks with people, not the kind that turns his back on the slow to keep pace with a car. I will not tie anyone's seeds to a pen I cannot see." "You are not the lead farmer yet," said Nana Essie softly. "Wait. Let your village make you one." She turned to Mr. Tano. "We will put your heart under this bowl gently and see if it is steady," she said. "Answer simple things. Then we will speak our terms." He knelt without argument. He was not a fool. He slipped his hand under the wood and studied the bowl of water with a face that had learned to be calm in many meetings. "Do you plan to take our picture with the stool for your paper?" asked Nana Essie, the water held. "We did," he said. Abena's mouth twitched. He continued, "We will not." "Did you plan to build your shed under this tree?" asked Uncle Mensa. He hesitated a breath. "We thought it would look good in a poster," he said. "But we did not understand." "We will build where you say. Do you plan to require all farmers to sell to you?" asked Auntie Abena. "No," he said. "Not all?" "We ask for half. We ask for your trust. Trust is not a law." The bowl stayed steady. He answered with care. He did not pretend he was a saint. He did not need to. He needed to be read clearly. We had learned how. Then Nana Essie did something unexpected. She gestured to me. "Daughter," she said, Place your hand under the bowl now and answer one question for the stool. I want to see your way of holding weight. I knelt and slid my hand under the seat. The wood was familiar. It murmured hello like an old friend. If this program brings fast food in hungry months, she asked, will you push to plant it everywhere because of your fear? Or will you use it as a bridge only where bridges are needed? I will not plant it everywhere, I said. I will hold a piece of my field for it only if I can feed the soil the next season. I will keep my seed line. I will not forget what my grandmother knew because a bright poster looked at me. The water did not move. She beckoned to Kojo. He came and knelt. He would have done it even if she had not called him. The stool had already taught him the comfort of putting your pride down where it can see the sky and needs no dark corner. If you are made lead farmer, she said, will you ask your sister before you place training on her land? Will you speak to the stool when your ears are tired and a van sings a song in front of your gate? Yes, he said. I will ask her. I will speak to it. I will not go alone into a road I do not know. The water stayed. The breeze forgot to move for a breath. Good, she said. She stood slowly. Now hear the stool's path, she added, voice gentle but firm, the way a hand places a cup where it will not tip. We will join this program in the way that fits our bones. We will host a training twice each moon for 3 moons, not under this tree, but at the schoolyard, where the ground can hold many feet and the chalkboard can hold many ideas. We will not allow posters in the shrine room or pictures of the stool. We will trial your seed on a small piece of our communal fallow land near the old mango grove, not in Amma's field, not in any field that feeds more than one family unless that family lifts its own hand and says yes. The trial will be tended by 4 people chosen by our village, a girl, a boy, a man, and a woman, so that the learning does not sit in one lap. She looked at the 4 corners of our little world beneath the tree, as if to speak to the leaves and the roots too. We will not sign a paper that says exclusive. We will sign one that says we will sell a portion after we have eaten, after the stool has eaten, after those in true need have eaten. We will not borrow easily. If your fertilizer comes with a borrowed promise, you will leave 1 sack of seed as a bond with us, and you will place a small fund with the elders to cover a bad year. You will speak all terms in our language with our children present, so that no one says they did not know. At the end of 3 harvests, we will sit here again and ask, did this improve our house? If yes, we will continue. If no, we will close the gate with thanks and not with anger. She turned to Prosper. And nephew, she said, you will take pride in being a bridge, but remember that a bridge holds when it does not move while others cross. Do not jump when a truck is on you. He bowed his head, and for the first time that day his voice lost its extra shine. I hear, he said. I will hold. There was a murmur at the edge of the gathering. Not all were pleased. Yah, neighbor with the mustache that sometimes hid a sting, lifted his chin. And who will be lead farmer? He asked with a small smile, already ready to tease. Will we pin a badge on Kojo or on the stool? His words carried a joke with a little rock in it. Neither, said Uncle Mensa kindly. We will not pin a badge. We will place a broom. Lead farmer means first to sweep the training ground and last to complain when the sun is rude. Kojo can do that. He has learned his knees and his mouth know each other's languages now. Laughter rose and fell. Kojo smiled in a way that made me happy. No show, no swell. Just a man who wished to carry something in the right way. I will sweep, he said simply. Mr. Tano and Abina stepped aside to speak in low voices. They did not leave. They did not throw their folder in the dust. Finally, Abina turned back and nodded. We agree, she said. We will write it. We will leave our bond here. We will not ask for your stool. We will help build a drying rack at your school as our first gift. No banner on your sacred tree. Our banner can sit on our van. That is enough. And one more thing, I said before anyone could close the circle. I could feel the stool listening through the bones of my knees. If this trial draws our young away from the old seeds, the ones that carry our grandparents' breath, then we will stop. We will not become a place where all seed has strangers for parents. Agreed, said Abina. Diversity saves a family. It saves a field. We teach that too. She looked at Mr. Tano. He pressed his lips together in a line, then relaxed them. He saw a way to keep numbers making sense and faces not turning away. He nodded. We closed the meeting with a simple prayer. The stool returned to its cool place. The shade deepened and then began to lift as it does. No need to push it. The days that followed were a blur of small sounds. The clack of hammers building the drying rack at the school. The roll of a drum when the first training began on a Saturday morning. The rustle of paper as Abina explained, with patience, how to read a label. The whisper of the early seed dropping into the trial bed at the mango grove. The field near the mango grove smelled sweet and brown. We added compost. We set a fence of twigs not to keep people out, but to draw a line around the lesson so that it would not run away. We chose the 4 caretakers together. Kwame, with his quick hands and his new pride. Efua, a girl who asked questions in a voice that lifted like birds. Ya, who volunteered with a raised eyebrow and more heart than habit. And Auntie Abina, who would not let foolishness sit down in the middle of any task without pointing it to a proper seat first. They each tied a small strip of cloth to a stick at the 4 corners. 1 blue, 1 red, 1 green, 1 white. It made the bed look like a small boat in a garden, ready to sail us across a small, important sea. We watched. We learned. Early dawn rose fast, as promised. On the 45th day, green came like a crowd. By the 60th, pods began. We timed the harvest to fill a week when sometimes bellies are quieter than we like them to be. That week, there was less hush at night. There was a sound of spoons and thanks. The seeds were tender and sweet. But when we checked the soil, it looked more tired than after the beans we had saved for years. It drank water faster. It asked for more. It was not a thief. It was a hungry guest who did not yet know our house well enough to find the water jar on its own. We balanced. We planted a second small trial, this time with an extra bed of cowpea nearby to help the ground hold itself. The second harvest came, not as fast but with less begging. We wrote the details on a board at the school, a new ritual. Food turned into numbers and words so minds and mouths both could eat. Children traced the charts with their fingers. They asked why one line bent and another stayed steady. Afua stood by them and explained with a calm voice, the way Abana had explained to us. Her words were clean. They did not wear shoes too big for them. Not all went easy. Ya, with his mustache and his little jokes, planted early dawn outside the trial in half of his own field, more than we advised. He did not feed the soil the way we showed. He watched the green and he smiled. Then the plants asked for water he did not have. Their leaf edges crisped. They bore, but their mouths were dry. He brought the first basket to the schoolyard and set it down with a thump. He crossed his arms. It promised, he said. It did not keep its promise. We did not say, "We told you." We did not say, "Read the poster better." We walked with him to his field. We felt the soil. We showed him the empty spaces where water should have lingered and did not. We did not speak to him as if he were a child. We spoke to the ground, and he listened to the ground with us. He stayed to the end of the training that week and did not joke. When the next moon turned, he planted cowpea and laid down grass. He did not clap when his field came back. He bowed his head to it. Prosper visited often with the van. He brought small gifts we had agreed on. Chalk, measuring tapes for the schoolyard, a few bags of lime for a far plot where the soil had turned too sour. He did not speak of the stool again. He did hum sometimes while he waited, a city tune. He sat on our veranda and told us stories of tall buildings that hid the sky, of buses that growled like bulls at one another, of markets where people sold the same thing side by side and still both lived. He looked at Kojo with admiration that was not false. "I told them there," he said one evening, jerking his chin toward the road, "that my village listens like a wise herd. No stick needed. The stool makes a sound that tells our feet where to go." Kojo laughed softly. "We once needed a stick," he said. "We put it down. He was a good lead farmer, if one had to use that word." He arrived early at the schoolyard. He swept. He asked old women to speak first sometimes. He held the tools as often as he held the chalk. He did not stand on a rock to make himself taller. He told stories about our father's way of reading the sky. Not to make the program small, but to make our minds wide enough to hold both old and new. Sifa returned one afternoon while we were turning compost. He wore a simpler shirt and he came without a truck. He greeted us with a smile that had lost some of its calculation and found a little patience along the way. He watched the teaching. He lifted a basket and carried it from one side of the yard to the other without being asked. He sat on the low wall and listened to Abina speak about cost and return. He raised his hand like a student. "If the early seed fills a gap," he asked, "can I offer to buy that gap only, not the whole harvest? And can I put a table at the school during training day so people do not have to carry far?" Abina looked at him and then at us. "If you agree to our terms," she said. "No trick papers. Your price on the board before dawn. Your scales checked with 2 eyes. Your mouth quiet unless asked for advice. Your truck kept away from our tree." He nodded with mock solemnity. "My truck will fear your tree always," he said. "It dreams of it at night," we laughed. He put his table under a mango tree at the edge of the schoolyard, where shade was good, and his calling voice could not drown out a single lesson. We reached the end of 3 moons. The trial had given us learning, not miracles. The hunger days had been easier. The soil had asked for more, and we had learned to feed it without starving ourselves. The banner at the school had begun to fade in the sun, which was just as well. Bright words do not feed a child. Beans do. Early Dawn wanted to host a bigger event to show their success, to take the experiment and spin it like thread into a cloak they could wear to other places. They sent a letter with nice folds. The letter asked to hold the event under our silk cotton tree because, visually, it communicates harmony between heritage and innovation. They promised a tent that would not bruise a leaf. They promised to bring a radio van to broadcast to other villages. They promised to give away small radios as prizes. They promised to speak for only 1 hour. We read the letter under the same tree it wished to borrow. The roots of the tree shifted in the ground like an old person adjusting a blanket. The air and the leaves held a question. "What will you do?" We took the letter to the stool. We placed it on the mat. We did not need to bring the bowl again. We already knew our rule, but we brought it because ritual makes a path for many feet to walk without stepping on each other. The elders stood. The children came. The goats stayed away as ever. We uncovered the stool. The air cooled. Even in a season of heat, that small cool came. It felt like someone placing a damp cloth on a warm brow. "We will not make a fair thing a costume," said Nana Essie. "They can hold their event at the school, where the chalkboard can share the stage, where our children stand tall because they have learned, not because they are standing beside a tree that will outlive them. They can bring their radio there. They can bring their prizes. We will dance and eat under the school roof that our own fathers mended. This tree will keep its own quiet. The stool will sit in the shrine and hear our thanks before and after like the old ones taught." "That is enough." She looked at us. We nodded, happy that she had said out loud what our hearts already knew. Prosper frowned when we told him. "The school is not as beautiful," he said, then immediately waved his hand as if to smooth his own frown. "But yes, we will do as you ask," Abina smiled. "I prefer chalk and children to a camera and a deity," she said in her dry way. "The chalk is forgiving when the word is wrong." The day of the event came. The schoolyard filled with farmers from other villages, with boys who wanted hats, with girls who wanted to count sacks. There was a drum, but it did not drown the lessons. There was a pot of soup, but it did not make people forget the words. There was a table for Sifa, which he kept modest. He weighed twice for everyone and did not argue when a woman asked to put a second sack on his scale just to watch his face. Kojo stood on the ground, not on a stage. He opened the event with a broom in his hand, sweeping the path where people would walk to the trial beds. He set the broom down and then spoke for 10 minutes about soil. He used both his hands. He told the story of the first speed seed and the tired dirt after, and the better second plot when Kaupi helped. He did not pretend the first speed was wrong. He did not pretend it was the only path. He looked at me and lifted his chin slightly, a sign that the field and the brother were one idea in his heart now. My own heart answered with a quiet yes that did not need sound. Prosper swallowed his pride and did well. He called Abina to the front often. He did not try to turn himself into the drum. He allowed himself to be a hand that carried a pot, and not always the one that stirred it. When he spoke in the last part, he told a small story about his first year in the city, when he had thought every new light was a better light, and how the first time the power failed, he learned to cook by candle, and how the food tasted fine because hunger is an honest judge. People laughed. He laughed with them. He bowed to the elders, and his bow did not have any extra sugar. At the end of the event, we did what we had promised at the start. We gathered under the silk cotton tree, but not as a stage, only as a home. We did not bring cameras. We did not bring a microphone. We brought yams and beans and gratitude. We set a basket near the shrine. We spoke small words. We let the wind carry them where words go when they are finished. We covered the stool. We left the room cool. The next market day, I did something I had been shaping in my mind since the first day Kojo hung the keys on the nail by the door. I asked him to walk with me to the elders with a new paper, one that did not come from a van. It was a simple paper, written by the young teacher with lines that a child could follow, with words that sat easy. It said this: "The field at the west boundary, marked by white stones, is mine to farm for my life, by right of work and by our mother's blessing. That the fruit of it is mine to bring into the house in a way that honors our family. That if I must travel or if I grow ill, the field will be tended by someone I name. That I will share its first harvest each season with the Stool. That no paper of any kind will move that field from beneath my feet without 2 elders and my mother's voice. That Kojo is the head door, and I am the good branch, and we will speak before either one decides for the other." Kojo read it. He held the paper as if it were a small child, careful with both hands. He did not ask to remove a line. He did not ask to add his name first. He called Ma. She came and sat with us under the veranda's cool. We read it again, with water, with one slow pause between each sentence as if to let the paper breathe. We took it to the elders. We did not go alone. The people who had walked us through our other matters walked with us again. Auntie Abina, Uncle Mensa, and even Yaw, whose presence said a neighbor's eyes count as a mirror too. The stool did not need to be uncovered for this, but we placed the paper on the mat near its door. We placed a calabash of water on top of the paper, a symbol, a weight, and a small test. Could this piece of writing hold water in our house? The calabash sat steady. The elders smiled without showing teeth the way old men do when they feel relief and do not wish to cry. Kojo pressed his thumb to the paper, leaving a mark like a leaf. I pressed my name where the teacher had left space. Ma pressed the side of her hand, a gentle mark. The young teacher signed his name with neat pride, the way a man hangs a clean shirt outside to declare that he is ready for a visitor. We placed the paper in a gourd with other family papers, and we did not put a lock on that gourd. We kept it near the shrine room, where breath of old stories keeps new words from drying out. Later, when the sun left the yard and the goats walked slowly as if they had been paid for their patience, Kojo came to my door. He held a small package wrapped in white cloth. "For you," he said. He did not make a speech. He unwrapped it. Inside lay a string of beads. They were not the same as our mother's lost ones. They could never be. But they were made by hands in our town, by an old woman who puts time into every bead, and they were the color of rain when it is about to fall, gray-blue with small light at the edges. He lifted them with 2 hands and held them the way he had held the paper. "I cannot return what I sold," he said. "I can only carry a different beauty to the same place where I broke it." I took the beads. They were cool. They warmed as they touched my skin. "We do not replace a mother's story with another," I said. "We add a chapter." I laughed softly at myself. "Listen to me, speaking like a teacher." He laughed too, the kind of laugh that happens when the house's walls lean in closer by a small amount and you feel them shelter you. Ma watched from the doorway. Her face softened and then brightened like a sky that cannot hold its light back. "Come," she said. "Let me tie them with my own hands." She called me to sit before her, as she had when I was small. She looped the beads and tied them with a knot that would not choke and would not slip. She touched my forehead with 2 fingers. "You carry my story and your own," she said. "Carry both with clean words." The season carried on. The early seed had its place. Our old seed kept its honor. The schoolyard became a place where people spoke to each other with less hurry. The shrine room kept its cool. Kwame wore a small red ribbon one day and announced he would like to be a teacher too, not always the boy who runs for mangoes. He smiled like a boy who has chosen to carry light in a cup with a steady hand. Small troubles visited, as they always do. A goat escaped and ate the leaves of our cassava. Children quarreled over who would carry the chalk box. The van got stuck in the mud once and we used our hands to push it. We pushed with laughter. The driver, a new one who did not yet know the way our road bends, got out and looked at his tires with anger. Abina touched his shoulder lightly. "It is only mud," she said. "Mud makes walls. It only offends when you dress too proud to meet it." One afternoon, a policeman came to our yard to ask for small help because he had kept the road safe. He stood with another man in uniform and looked at our hands, not our eyes. He wanted money, not conversation. Kojo greeted him with respect. He brought water. He brought a small plate of fried plantain. He did not bring the gourd of money. He pointed to the shrine room. "We take our matters there," he said. "Our stool does not give us permission to hand you coins without a receipt. If you need help, we will gather and give rice. If you need a bribe, you will finish your meal and leave our yard with your hands as empty as ours." The policeman, unused to being refused with a soft voice and no fear, made a face, then laughed at himself, then took the plantain and left. It was not triumph. It was practice. We held one more public meeting under the tree at the end of that year, when the air became thin and bright, and the colors of cloth at the market looked like fruit. We invited people from neighboring villages. We placed our points on a board in a list of 10, shaped by months of learning. Before a paper enters a pocket, it sits on a mat. Read slowly. Then read again. The stool hears first when honor is touched. The radio is a visitor, not a master. A new seed is a guest, not a king. The head is a door. The door opens and closes with care. The branch gives shade and holds birds. A child can carry a truth without breaking it. A traitor with a smile is a friend. A traitor with a bond is a better friend. We share the first harvest with the stool, not because it is hungry, but because we are. People nodded. People asked questions. We answered with stories, not laws. Sepha stood in the back and listened, a rare stillness on his face. At the end, he lifted a hand. "I came to learn how not to lose my name," he said. "I will carry that list in my truck, not for you, for me." We told him to bring a board and hang it by his table. He did. That evening, when the lamps were lit and the moths danced their gentle, foolish dance against the glass, Kojo and I sat on the veranda with Ma. The stool was in its room. The tree was holding the dark like a cup. The radio, quiet, sat like a well-behaved cat in its corner. A breeze lifted the edge of the cloth on the table and set it down again. The world smelled like pepper soup and new soil. "I used to think strength meant holding tight," Kojo said. "Now I think it means holding in the right places and opening in the right places." He looked at the doorway where the keys hung. He did not point to them. He did not need to. "It means listening until the noise becomes a song," I said. "Sometimes the song is small." I thought of the sound the bowl makes when a word sits crooked under it. "That tiny scrape changed our house. And it means walking back," Ma said. "When your foot steps wrong, you walk back. The road does not hate you for a wrong step. It waits." We fell silent. A firefly bumped, flashed, and flew away. For a long time, I listened to the river's far conversation with its stones. It told the same old story in a new way each night. It did not tire of its work. On the last day of the year, we rose before dawn. We carried our basket to the shrine room. We gave thanks with our simple words. For rain that eventually remembered our fields. For wind that sometimes brings a message instead of dust. For hands that learn. For mouths that find the polite word where once they found the hard word. For a stool older than our mistakes. willing to hold the weight of our small lives and make our backs stronger, not sore. We did not ask to be spared trouble. We asked to be kept true. We asked for shade that both trunk and branch could give after we went to the field. The ground held the nights cool. We stepped around the white stones. I bent and pressed my palm into the soil the way I had the first day. It answered with a small warmth that traveled up my arm into my chest. I thought of my father's map drawn with a stick. I thought of the day Kojo called me servant in a crowd, and how that word had fallen away like a dry leaf. I thought of beads and papers, of bowls and chalk lines, of bright posters and honest mud, of boys who learned to aim for holes, not birds, of a woman from town with a calm voice whose scarf hid a small laugh, of a van that had learned our road by heart and drove it with less hurry. Kojo stood beside me and breathed out. "Sister," he said, "we are not done learning." "No," I said. "But we are walking." "Together," he said. "Together," I answered. The morning unrolled itself, thin blue to gold. The crows argued somewhere near the fig trees. The smell of Ma's porridge lifted from the kitchen like a song. The silk cotton tree held its arms over us, old, patient, strong. And in the shrine room, the stool sat in its white, not asleep, not awake, simply there, its silence ready for the next time someone needed to see their own face and could not without help. We were grateful. We were steady. We were home.